Good evening. Welcome to the August 12th Village Board Work Session. This meeting is called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very exciting and lots of guests this evening and presentations and discussions about a lot of things that are happening and then that may be happening in the village. But we will begin with any announcements or updates that I have that members of the board have. We did have a meeting last night, which is very unusual, having back-to-back nights, and we had over an hour of opening remarks, and so I expect tonight will be much, much less. Does anyone have any updates or comments on the formal agenda?
I'm good.
Nope.
I'm okay too.
And the only thing that I'll bring up is and then heard back from our staff when I touched bases, as so many of us have seen significant damage to our property and debris in our property. Thank you very much to the Public Works team, who has been much more open to collecting downed limbs and just asking people to do their best to get it out to the curb. They can't go on your property to get it. Don't put it. You put it on your curb the way you normally would, but they've been doing that for the last, what are we up to, a week now that folks have been putting out their debris. So they're going to be wrapping up and going back to the usual expectations for getting collection. So I just want to say thank you to the Public Works Department for going above and beyond during this difficult time. With so many things they had to deal with, it's certainly helpful to have the debris taken away in less than the strict format that we usually adhere to. All right, Madam Manager.
Sorry about that. So first up, we have our guest from Ossining Innovates to present on their, they've just completed, I believe, their first cohort of entrepreneurial training. And we're looking forward to hear from them on what they're up to. This is a project that Henry Welt and Abby Lewis have initiated and have really stewarded through, and we're very pleased to hear about their first cohort and their partnership with WTI too. So we're excited to hear about that, and with that I will hand it over to them.
Okay, thank you. So let's see, are you gonna, Jaime, are you gonna display the slides, or you want me to go ahead and share from here?
I'm gonna have you share from there so that you can go page to page.
All righty. So thank you very much for inviting us here tonight to tell you about what we've been doing with Ossining Innovates and with our partnership with WTI. Before I say anything, I just want to more. I want to make sure everybody can see the screen and hear me.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So this has been an amazing journey. As Karen said, we were in front of the village board just about a little over a year ago with a request about this idea that Henry and I had around launching an accelerator, a business accelerator here, serving our community in Ossining, but also serving the wider region. And at the time when we came to you, we were having conversations with an organization in Massachusetts, a wonderful organization called Entrepreneurship for All, or E for All. They were a group that was serving mid-sized cities of about 100,000, populations of about 100,000, and they were doing this thing that we call inclusive entrepreneurship. And that is serving individuals of all walks of life, including individuals in particularly underserved and underrepresented segments, and giving them access to the latest and greatest in entrepreneurial thinking. And so when we came to you just over a year ago, we were talking about bringing E for All and their methodology here to Ossining. And at the time, their business model required us to find funding for 3 years of operating funds, which turned out to be roughly $900,000 in total, $300,000 a year. And the village board embraced our vision and believed in what we were setting out to do. And you passed a resolution saying that you would fund 10% of what we were trying to do with E for All, or programming when we got it off the ground. But at the same time, while you embraced what we were doing, you asked us why we were working with an organization in Massachusetts. When here we are in New York, there's so many folks around us with wonderful programs and talented individuals, and was there another way in which we could launch this program? And a couple months later, as we were doing our fundraising, this wonderful organization, the Women's Enterprise Development Corporation, WEDC, came and found us. We kind of found them in some meetings we were at along the way, and we discovered it was a perfect match. This was a group, WEDC, Anne is here and Nikki is here, that had been serving underrepresented individuals and helping them start businesses for a number of years quite effectively. They're here in Westchester, and so we began to talk and discovered that we could start and launch a pilot and do it for substantially less than the $300K. We have, just so everybody knows, we launched, as I think Karen alluded to, we did launch that pilot back in April. And I just have to say, before I keep going here, that it happened to be the best medicine for mental health when we went into COVID and lockdown, to be with this amazing group of 12 individuals who joined our cohort starting in April. Before I go any further, the one other thing I was remiss in not saying, that we actually have 4 participants from our first cohort who are here with us tonight. We have Elena Dart, we have Liz Phillips, we have Kenrick Gordon and Aurel Smith, all of whom are part of our program and have joined us to either say a few words or to be here to answer any questions that you have as we go. So with that, let me see if I can get this to turn the page. There we go. So I wanted to just take a few moments. I know for those of you on the board who heard our pitch last time, when we talk about inclusive entrepreneurship and why it should matter here in Ossining and here in the region, you're pretty familiar with that. But I know that there are others here for whom this is new. So why is entrepreneurship so important? Well, entrepreneurship leads to economic development and to jobs and empowerment of individuals. These are all things that are very important for the village, but also, quite frankly, one of the things that Henry and I believe very firmly is that entrepreneurial thinking and an entrepreneurial skill set are plain and simple life skills. Understanding how to think about what a problem is, turn that problem into an opportunity, creatively thinking about solutions. That helps us whether we're launching a business, whether we're launching a nonprofit, whether we're addressing challenges in our own community and our own life. Those skills are critically important. The other thing that we want to get across here is that an entrepreneurial mindset and the state of our tools are offered by other organizations. If you think about going into Manhattan and you go to a Techstars, which is an accelerator largely for tech companies. If you go to Ivy League school, you will learn many of these same techniques. As I said, you'll learn how to spot an opportunity, you'll learn solution development, risk mitigation, etc. And when we talk about inclusive entrepreneurship, we're talking about giving everyone, no matter their educational background, no matter their race, no matter their economic ability to pay for access to these kinds of skills, we want to offer access to these schools. The other thing that's really important about what we do is that it's inclusive. And so by that we mean we want everybody learning side by side. So whether you have a high school degree, a college degree, a PhD, excuse me, you should be in that same room, working together, learning from each other, and helping each other grow. And that creates stronger ideas, better solutions, and greater access. The other thing that we think is very important is community. Entrepreneurship, as many of you know who are entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship is a team sport. It's about creating networks. It's about being able to reach out and learn from others. And so this idea of coming together, learning from each other, creating community is all about networking. And we see that every day, that networking creates access to jobs, it creates access to funding, it creates access to opportunity. Some of you may have actually seen in the paper today, there was an announcement about the, what did they call it? They called it the New York Jobs CEO Council. 27 big businesses, these are the IBMs, Accentures, McKinsey's, the leaders got together and pledged to create access to 100,000 individuals from underserved communities across the next 10 years. And if you read what they talked about, one of the important things they talked about is creating access, creating networks, connecting underserved communities to individuals who have the power and the jobs and the like. So this is when we talk about the things that are important to us when we talk about inclusive entrepreneurship. Why do we think what we're doing here is unique? Well, what you'll see is our program is for no cost. What we do, we deliver in the evening, because lots of individuals actually have to have a day job to put food on the table while they're thinking about what their new business will be and getting it off the ground. Our program is for both for-profit and nonprofit ideas. It's for individuals with ideas that are investable, but also non-investable. The bakery, which isn't going to have a big VC fund investing in them, but which also can get off the ground, can create economic opportunity, can create jobs, and enable anybody to take care of themselves. So this is what we mean when we talk about inclusive entrepreneurship and what we do and what is unique. Henry, anything you want to add? I apologize, I babbled a little bit on this slide, but Henry, anything you'd like to add here?
No. I think you said it's perfect.
Okay, so what are we doing with our program? And we wanted to lay this out for you very specifically. I think Karen mentioned the fact that we launched our pilot program here, and we haven't completed the program. And the reason why we haven't completed it is our program is 9 months, 9+ months long. The reason why is we think it's very important that we provide support to individuals for a long enough period of the time for them to get off the ground. So at this point, we've done our weekly class. So month 1 to 4, which started in April, month 1 to 4, every one of our participants had 3 hours of class each week. They also had access to an hour of office hours. They had an hour a week of access to a mentor, at least one. Ultimately, we want to get to 3 mentors. And they all had the opportunity to pitch their idea in front of 3 judges and win small prizes. During this first period, the first 1 to 4 months, we also gave them 2 books and provided lots of on-call support and invited in a number of guest speakers to come and to share their own stories, their own experiences about starting businesses, about topics like branding, about topics like finance and the like. The next phase of our program goes into the next level of support. So we shift from having 3 hours of class a week to meeting 2 hours a month as a group. We also provide 2 to 3 hours per month of mentor time, and we then create an opportunity for a final pitch. That final pitch will also do a dry run, and they'll have an opportunity for prizes. In the last period of the accelerator program, we continue to meet as a group about 2 hours a month, as well as continuing to have mentor time. The reason we want to do this again is because network is critically important, and because we know that even if you begin to learn the tools, the mindset of entrepreneurship, how to describe what your customer segment is, how to describe what the problem is that you're solving, how to describe your solution. We know that you don't just leave 12, 15 weeks of classes and successfully launch a business that can sustain itself and support you and some employees. We know that it takes a lot more to be successful. Any questions or anything else, Henry, you'd like to add here?
No.
All right. So I think most of the people here know something about Henry Welt and myself. We're both Ossining residents, and you've probably seen things we've done in the past. So I wanted to take a moment and just ask Ann Janiak, who is the president and CEO of WEDC, to say a few words about WEDC and about the partnership. Ann?
Yes, thank you, Abby. Good evening, Mayor Gearity and trustees. I'm Ann Janiak. I'm the CEO of the Women's Enterprise Development Center, and I'm pleased to be here tonight along with my colleague, Nikki Hahn, to talk about our program, our Women's Business Center, and our collaboration with Ossining Innovates. WEDC is a 20-plus-year-old nonprofit organization that empowers women and minority entrepreneurs to start and expand small businesses. As you can see from this PowerPoint slide, we do that by providing a wide array of entrepreneurial training programs and services in English and Spanish. WEDC serves approximately 1,000 unduplicated clients each year. We're based in White Plains and conduct most of our trainings in the large cities in Westchester County, White Plains at our office, Yonkers, New Rochelle, and Mount Vernon. And since 2013, we have conducted trainings in the Mid-Hudson in Dutchess and Orange counties. When we first heard about the Ossining Innovates program this past fall, we were eager to learn more. We began to meet with Abby and Henry and soon realized that we shared a common purpose and spoke the same language. WEDC has always been proud of our ability to assist our clients at all stages of business development. And so the opportunity to partner with Ossining Innovates and to offer this intensive and robust community accelerator program made perfect sense. For WEDC to collaborate with OI was a no-brainer. Just for the record, I should add that we are not strangers to the Ossining community. For a period of about 4 years, around 2005, WEDC held its 60-hour program in English at Ossining High School. And just last year, we were contacted by a former graduate, an Ossining resident, to see if we could do a few workshops in Spanish at the public library. We were able to hold one in early March, just before everything closed down. So we look forward to continuing those virtual workshops. And of course, we very much look forward to our continued collaboration with Ossining Innovates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann, very much. Appreciate that. So what I'd like to do is just take a moment here. And as I said, we are very lucky to have 4 of our members of our first cohort here with us tonight. And I'd like to invite Liz Phillips, who is with us. Liz, are you? I'm trying to find you. There you are. You're off mute. Would you like maybe to share a few words of your experience with us tonight?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I'll start off in the same vein that I shared with Abby and Henry as I was reflecting that Ossining Innovates, this accelerator program, has really been a gift. For me, I consider this has been something that has allowed me to learn about some of the tools that are part of business development, but the fact that I'm able to apply them immediately and the use of real world examples, they've really provided an atmosphere that allows us to be able to both go beyond our dream to creation to acting, to action, I should say. And my hope is that more folks, again, will have the exposure and be able to really, embrace the spirit of entrepreneurship. This is, again, it's something that's new for me, but it's allowing me to be able to develop my skill sets and then really also consider what this means to both my my goals as a community organizer, and then also to consider how this will allow me to launch some of my own aspirations.
Wonderful.
So thank you.
Liz, thank you. Thank you so much for saying a few words. So we also have, as I said, we also have 3 other of our entrepreneurs here. I know, Mayor, that you were hoping that we keep this and move pretty quickly through. Do we have another moment to at least ask one other to share a few words with us?
Sure.
All right, so Kenrick, let me see where you are here. Can I put you on the spot?
I'm more than happy to say a couple words. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, I'm good?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Well, my name is Kenrick Gordon. I'm the owner of Gordon's Black Card Service. Before even being part of Austin Innovates, I already owned a business. So the idea of jumping into entrepreneurship, kind of like a school setting, was very exciting for me. Because I was also at a crossroad with my business, starting to get bored, starting to lose a lot of interest in what I was doing. So I thought it came along at a perfect time because business was going slow because of the pandemic. And throughout the weeks of going through this cohort, it's kind of helped me recharge and looked at my business a completely different angle. And I just think that it's not only good for people that want to get into entrepreneur, but it's also good for people that are already an entrepreneur. I think it's a great program all around. That's it.
All right, Henrik, thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, so just in the interest of time, as I said, we do have 2 other folks on, so if we have a few more moments and you guys have any other questions, maybe they could answer those. But I'll just kind of move to the final slide and return to where I started, which is when we came to you just over a year ago, we were looking at what we thought was going to be a $300,000 a year operating budget to support our vision of inclusive entrepreneurship. And in that vision, we talked about having 2 cohorts per year, and that each cohort would support about 12 to 15 participants. Through our partnership with WebC, we believe that we can get that ultimately, even with rent, in the day in which we can gather together in physically and not just online. We believe that we can get that number to probably about half of that 350K, give or take. But in the world of COVID, in which everything is online and we don't need to have a physical place, or we don't get to have a physical place to gather, we're talking about a budget which over the course of a year is a little bit over 100K. So I've provided here just the highlights of what the elements of that budget are. And also just so that you know, our funding model to date has been a mix of individual donations, business sponsorships, foundations, and grants. And I'm going to stop there and see what questions there are.
You want to unshare, Abby?
I can do that.
Great.
Thank you very much. And thank you also to Liz and Kenrick for giving us a little bit of insight into your experience with the program. We did have, I believe it was last May 2019, when we you first came to the village board and we passed that resolution saying that we were interested in supporting this initiative as and a couple of the members of the board today were not on the board then, so I'd like to sort of just bring them up to speed on what our thinking was at the time, which was that the village has some big picture economic development goals and encouraging small businesses to establish themselves and thrive in our community and to help the economic viability of our community. both the individuals and the community itself, that this was a tool that we felt could be really effective in that way. And that was our philosophy in passing the resolution initially. But at that time, as Abby explained, they had an intention, but did not yet have the formal relationship with the group. And now they do. And actually now you've already gone through one cohort, which is super helpful, because it sounds like, I'm sure you learned a lot in your first cohort, but it sounds like there was a lot of success already. And then that's so great to hear from the participants about your firsthand experience. It's not just Abby and Henry thinking that they're doing a good job. You're actually telling us that it's going well. And better than that is from a perspective as far as being able to fund this initiative, the original dollar amount that we had been anticipating was almost 3 times what is now you're anticipating for at least your first year of operation. And I just want to clarify that last slide. You were giving us the top line budget numbers for just the second cohort that is anticipated for this fall, and the cohort that is represented here by some of the students was a comparable expense. So the $10,075 is 10% of all of these first 2 cohorts, correct? I just want to make sure that that's clear.
That's correct. We have a little bit, as you can imagine, as this grows and as we have more people within our network, there's a little bit more work that goes into keeping people connected and managing and supporting people. But the total amount, so that one was just a little bit less expensive than the 55, but rounding.
So then the last thing that I'll mention, and then I'm sure that my colleagues have questions and comments. I've had an opportunity to speak with both of you. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to speak with each of the trustees. And my mindset for why this is a worthy conversation right now in this very difficult moment for everyone financially, including local governments. And we are definitely a local government that has reined in some of our anticipated spending on things like capital projects, where, or we've postponed things and said, well, we'll revisit this in 6 months or 12 months and see where we are financially. But to me, this is more akin to the mindset that we had when we said, you know what, this is a time when people are really in need. People are really struggling financially. And it's similar in our mindset of, we never wavered in our intention to support the Youth Bureau going forward, because we recognize that now more than ever, that was a really important resource to be able to provide to our families in our community. And to me, this is a similar mindset in supporting people's ability to be financially independent and able to keep moving forward. And so that's why I really think this is a worthy project for our consideration right now. And with that, I would like to hear from any of the trustees who I know that you've probably all been thinking about this as well. I'd like to hear your thoughts and questions.
Yeah, I can start. Thank you, Mayor. I thank you, Abby. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, all who have come to present tonight. This has been very helpful. So I want to start actually with a question for my colleagues. I see the Mayor has taken a walk, but for Manny or Rika, or now the Mayor who's back. Can you clarify for me, this is putting aside the worthiness of this cause, which I think is beyond rebuke, just in terms of function, how do we decide what organizations to support financially versus not?
Well, for me, we really don't financially. So you said support. I'm assuming you meant financially support. Financially support. We generally don't, actually. Using public money for not-for-profits, because they're all worthy. I don't know of one that isn't. I mean, certainly it wouldn't exist unless at least 3 or 4 people thought it was worthy. And I am uncomfortable in sort of sitting in judgment of which organization is more worthy than another. Similarly, it's very tough to use public money, and no time tougher, I think, in the past certainly 15 years than now, which is so different than when we were this time last year, in the middle of the, not middle, but I guess towards the end of a 10-year boom, but certainly very difficult to use public funding for not-for-profit, because not-for-profits are supposed to raise their own funds to carry out their mission. What was interesting in the conversation we had last time was a little bit of a uniqueness that this group speaking in front of us now, with similar, I think, all the right pieces in place, we're talking about an organization outside of actually New York State that had many years of experience. And it didn't feel like we were giving operating funds to a non-for-profit. It didn't feel that way. I'm not saying it wasn't. It didn't feel that way to most of us sitting on the board. It felt that to get them over the hump, the organization they were tying themselves to, meaning the folks in Ossining were tying themselves to, is a very experienced, entrepreneurial, I mean, you heard all before, I don't need to repeat it, and that the requirement was a $300,000 sort of commitment, and they wanted the village to have their name in a commitment format at the end, at the tail end, meaning that when they raised the 270,000, we would be at the tail end of 30,000. So if they weren't able to raise the money, the public would not be paying for anything, meaning that there would be, it was a little bit different than the usual sort of ask. It felt very different. This I'm struggling with because we generally don't actually, not never. And the mayor used the youth bureau, but the youth bureau is actually, I think, in the sense of starting an organization, feels different to me than a not-for-profit organization making an ask for, I may be reading this presentation wrong, but it feels like operating expense. So I actually have some questions, but I wanted to answer yours, and I don't know if that's helpful or not.
That is helpful. So the youth bureau, my understanding, is part of the village. It's part of the like this, we created a resolution. It's a part of. It's not separate from the village, whereas Ossining Innovates is separate from the village. Is that accurate?
Yes, I think of it as actually more similar to, in a way, to the Beams program, which ended up being a precursor and sort of always the mindset, the philosophy of Alice Joslo as being a precursor to what has now become the Youth Bureau. And the Beams program was initiated and led by her through her role with Open Door, and then actually utilized some of the space in the library in that instance. But it was a program that we funded. It was, I think, $45,000 a year, and we've done it for 3 years. And our mindset there was youth programming really matters to us. We've maxed out what we're capable of with our own resources. This is a good bang for our buck. It doesn't mean we have to hire more people. We get more programming for a group of people that we felt it was important for. In that case, it was middle school students. So I think when Rika said, it's not that we never do it, I think that's the one example in recent history that I've been a part of that has more similarities in some ways to this scenario.
Got it. And I want to underscore that my line of questioning is in no way questioning the validity of the work that you all doing. And I have some questions with respect to the work that you are doing as well to clarify my understanding there. But I've tried to anticipate having a group like Green Ossining that will come to us and say, global warming is literally threatening our availability of life, and so by funding us, you're funding our capacity to live, and it's like down the line. And so, are we setting ourselves up for something more difficult? Is there a precedent? That's what I was trying to clarify. I will limit myself to no more than 5 more minutes of questions. So I'll continue in terms of finances. The $10,000, $10,075. That's to the 10% of the operating cost. How did you get to that percentage? Why 10%?
So the 10% was essentially what we had asked for last time, and through discussions, that was the number that seemed reasonable to the village at the time. So similarly, And it gives a real stake here. Ultimately, when we have a physical presence, Henry and I would very much like it to stay grounded here in Ossining. We think that it benefits not only our community to serve residents that are here, but it benefits the kind of reputation of Ossining as we reach out to the broader region, and it brings more people into Ossining. So for us, it's kind of part of that anchor to keeping Ossining, to keeping the accelerator physically here.
Thank you. How much funding do you already have?
The first cohort was obviously fully funded already. And Henry, how close are we on the funding on the second?
You might need another $20,000. Round numbers, you know, maybe 25. But so could I step back and try to respond, Omar, to some of the things you raised, or do you want to finish all your questions first?
No, go for it.
Okay, I will. So first of all, the 10% came from the village, not from us. We went in last time saying it would cost around $300,000 a year to do it. The organization that we were talking to had their own stipulations about raising 3 years in advance, so it was $900,000. And the response in the conversations, I don't think it was our proposal or the village's hard proposal. I think it just seemed like a reasonable number in the context of $90,000 over 3 years. But that is really a question for the members of the board, how they got to that number. But in terms of this idea that you're supporting the operating budget of a not-for-profit, I think that's a very narrow window through which to look at this. This is a specific project that's undertaken by a partnership between an existing nonprofit, WETSI, and two Ossining residents, Abby and me, right? We don't even have an entity, and you're not supporting our budget in any way. What this is about, I think the bigger picture is this is about supporting Ossining residents and residents of neighboring communities in Westchester that would have an opportunity to do something that they rarely have the opportunity to do in the entire United States. This is not just a local problem, right? Entrepreneurship is at the forefront of business thinking. And as you look at it, where it is today, 15, 20 years after it started, it's a separate but equal arrangement already. People that are under-resourced do not have opportunities to get high-class, informed, powerful entrepreneurial training in the way that people that are overly well-resourced can do already in our society. So the idea of inclusive entrepreneurship is really radical. It's progressive. It's way out there. And it's something that, at least in my experience of Ossining, is very consistent with all the things that publicly we are proud of as a community. So the opportunity here and what the money would go for, I think from the village's point of view, would be two things. One is to help people who live in the village, as well as some people who don't live in the village, but we believe that mixing those groups is indeed a help to everyone in that group. But the opportunity also is reputational for Ossining, and that's a decision. You guys invest in infrastructure. You invest $400,000 to keep Main Street clean, put signs up that people shouldn't throw garbage in the street and stuff like that. There are lots of stuff we do as a community because we think it's best for the community. My experience, and Victoria can correct me if this is wrong, is that you in fact invested in the concept that Ossining should be a leader community in arts, right? You have a village arts committee, $500 a year for guaranteeing functions precisely so it could seed activities which it was believed would be beneficial to people who live here, right? It's not an expenditure in that case. It's a guarantee, but it could be an expenditure if something didn't work out. But you took that initiative and became the first community in all of Westchester to say we want to be a place that nurtures art, that nurtures creativity. We believe it's good for the soul. We believe it's good for business, and we want to do it. And that to me is an investment in the reputation of the community. Well, if you go out and look around and see what's being written about entrepreneurship and inclusive entrepreneurship, this little thing that we started in Ossining is the first of its kind in New York, with the exception of the group that we were almost partnering with in Massachusetts, E4All. It is one of the first in the United States. E4All is already coming into New York. We've talked to them, and they want to go to Buffalo, and I think, what's the other city? Rochester, I think, because they're targeting cities of 100,000 folks and more. And once again, you see developing this divide. There are folks that think that you can't pull this thing off in a city of in a community of 25,000 people. So they're focusing on larger cities. And once again, the potential for communities like Ossining being left behind in that process is very great. It's very real. And I think we're on the verge, and I don't mean to sound presumptuous at all, but I think we're on the verge of proving a case that communities of modest means and not great populations, such as Ossining, can do something special which helps the people of Ossining, both in terms of finding opportunities and not only business opportunities. You're talking about a time now when people have to rethink the idea of work. It's not only during the pandemic. I mean, look at what's happening around us and ask ourselves, how well prepared are our kids that get A's in Ossining High School? I don't care who we're talking about. How well prepared are our kids? How well prepared are our parents who are sitting on jobs where they're used to going into an office? How well prepared are they for a world that 5 years from now, maybe 40% work at home? What skills do they have? How do they know how to acquire those skills? What kind of jobs are going to be out there that are work at home jobs? These are questions that people are asking not nationally. The tools that we're providing in a program like this are directly aimed at helping people figure out why those problems are really opportunities for themselves, how they can grab hold of their lives and change their lives. So I think that's what the investment is in. And the question for the board, I think in terms of the $10,000 or whatever it is do we want a community be out in front of this thing? Or do we want to just watch as it happens? I mean, that's to me what it's about. It's not about operating expenses.
Which I appreciate. I'm going to, I have many more questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to read them out just so you hear what questions I have in my head. I'm going to email them to you so that we can talk about them offline. The last question will be the one that I would love for you to answer, and then I will yield to the rest of my colleagues. So the questions that I have in my brain are, you talk about inclusive entrepreneurship. Who are you looking to include? And specifically, what are the barriers to entry that those folks have to entrepreneurship? What does ongoing support look like after the 9 months or so? Recognizing that many businesses don't succeed after X number of years, how does the ongoing support look like for, let's say, doing it again, if they wanted to do the program again? Do you already have a space? If so, where? If not, where would you want it to be? And what kind of support would you be looking for that? Do you have any guiding principles when it comes to the kinds of businesses that you're looking to support? You talked about investable and non-investable, many different kinds, but are you looking for businesses that support local populations, that scale well, that are sustainable, that are ecological, et cetera? In terms of strategy, how does Ossining Innovates and WEDC, how do you work together? What does that look like? For WEDC specifically, and thank you for joining us. What have you learned about investing in entrepreneurs since 1997, and how can what can Ossining Innovates take from that, especially when it comes to my next question? What are your key performance indicators? How do you define success in the short term, in the long term? What does that look like, and how do you quantify it? What happens if you don't get this funding? How do you plan to raise the rest of the 20K? And my last question, the one that I would actually like for you to answer, is what does Spanish language support look like, particularly when we have members of our population that are Spanish dominant. So having a Spanish language cohort specifically might function better for them than something else. Would love your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Did you say that you wanted the last one answered currently?
Yes, please.
So the idea simply on Spanish language support is we're 100% committed to it. We felt that we could not reasonably begin a program and tackle that first, both from the point of view of resources. We'd have to develop an entire curriculum in Spanish. It's not only a matter of finding someone that can teach it, but it was at the forefront of our presentation to the board when we originally met. It's the forefront of Abby and my thinking about what we need to do if we're going to serve this community and many of the others in the nearby surrounding area. So yes, we're committed to it.
Can I just very quickly, and I know, Omar, you had a lot of questions and we do want to get you those answers, but just really quickly, ongoing support. Ultimately, we want 3 mentors per participant. What that means is you essentially have what we call a friendly advisory board. If all goes well, or frankly, unless there's a really horrible match of those personalities, now you have 3 talented, connected business people who are your mentors probably for life, right? That's the way these relationships end up being created. And so as you move forward, and as you say, as you hit those inevitable bumps, because we all hit bumps, no matter how well your business is planned out, they're there. And then the second thing is, and any one of the members from the cohort who are here tonight will tell you, we spend most of our time talking about how do you think about your customer? How do you think about your customer need? How do you work through all the issues? So when that bump comes, that will come, you now have the tools to prepare you to actually think how you're going to understand what's going on and then pivot to the new opportunity. Lots more on everything else, but we'll get that another time.
Could I just make a quick comment? We, as I mentioned in the beginning, have been an organization of serving entrepreneurs since 1997. We were one of the first groups to do training in Spanish since 2001. We also are funded through a number of government agencies, federal, state, county, and city, through CDBG funding. I don't know if the village gets, community block development grants, but that is a way that a number of cities do fund the work we are doing in other locations in Westchester. And
go right
no,
ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I just wanted to propose that. I don't, Henry and Abby and I and Nikki, we haven't even talked about that, but it is a source of funding that may allow the village to be on firmer ground in terms of putting out a contract for services through CDBG funding.
Trustee Lopez, thank you. Those were a lot of really thoughtful questions. And I think that giving Abby and Ann and Henry an opportunity to understand those questions and come back to you and to us with some deeper understanding of the program itself is probably a good next step. I also want to thank all of our presenters, and Henry, you always give such a very passionate.
That's why Abby spoke the whole time. You don't want my passion.
It's always very inspiring, but at the core of it, that I think is helpful for those of us in village government, because this is, it doesn't really fit into a box so easily. So I think the fact that WETC is a not-for-profit can sort of muddy the conversation a little bit for us. But your analogy of we spend money on lots of projects and initiatives that further our big picture goals, whether that's anti-litter campaigns that support economic development, or whether that's, I'm thinking of all the economic the downtown stuff now, like the lights, or whether it's, different programs that we pay for, whether we're paying for them to a vendor who's a for-profit business that is going to provide a service that we think is important, or we're reaching out and partnering to pay a not-for-profit to provide that service. That's a really different way of thinking of it than how I actually entered this conversation myself. So this has been a good process for me to be listening to everybody's thoughts and perspective on this. And we do have a pretty heavy agenda, but I want to make sure that.
Mayor, could I just?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Henry.
Just in terms of framing this, in terms of Omar's questions, for the deliberations that you have when we're not in the room. I think I just want to emphasize this is not a contribution to our operating budget. At $10,000, we don't have to be rocket scientists to realize that we're going to operate whether or not we get $10,000 from the Village of Ossining. So this is not purely about that money. In many ways, Omar, I think of this as an opportunity for the village to get in a leadership position on a movement that's important, that affects the people who live here very, very intimately, and that is going places. I mean, you're going to hear inclusive entrepreneurship nationally. This is not a little game that's being played, you know, just because two of the residents here wanted to do something. So I really think of the $10,000 commitment as an opportunity for the village to say, we were there. We are here. We welcome this kind of activity. This is who we are. This is an investment in our reputation, an honest investment, not a marketing investment, but this is a statement of values that we believe in, and we're proud of it. And if we were not virtual, we would have been housed this year. We had an arrangement with Figaro, and we wanted to do it in Ossining. And once the pandemic allows us to go bricks and mortar, Abby and I have been committed since day one to doing this within the Village of Ossining. So that helps justify that connection. It's a very minor investment, in my opinion, to keep that connection alive, right? To make this an Ossining initiative, not just an initiative that some people got together who happen to live here.
All right, thank you very much, Henry, and Abby, and Anne, and Nikki, you're here somewhere, even though you didn't speak, and to all of the participants in the program, those we heard from and those who are just here lending their support and accolades for the program. I'm glad that the first cohort was such a success for everyone. Before we move on to the last item, are there any last questions or recommendations for our next steps? What I'm hearing is the next step is that Anne, Abigail, or Henry is going to get back to us with their feedback and responses to the questions that have been asked, or any of your sense of what you think we need to hear based on today's conversation. And we can continue this by email and then decide if we're going to, what the next step would be for a meeting. Does that sound, is there anything more specific that people want to identify before we move on?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Mayor. Actually, I think only Omar actually asked questions because he went first. I feel the same way now that I did when we last spoke about this, which is I'm supportive of programs like this. The issue for me, which I stated earlier, to add to Omar's question, really I want to underscore the relationship to the larger organization. Let's see, I looked at your website. I can't actually find your clients. So that could just be me, because I did it while Omar was speaking. So I would just like to have that list, a clear understanding of your clients and how they come to you. In other words, this came to us in this presentation from two of our residents. But I'd like to get a clearer understanding of your clients and how you work with municipalities in general. If you, in fact, work with other municipalities, that would be of interest to me. If we could just add that to Omar's list, that would be really helpful for me, so that the members of the board, I'm not sure that the focus is on $10,000 or $5,000 or $20,000. I'm not sure. For me, that's the big issue here. I think it is how the relationship works and how it works. And this came up last time, and there was not a unanimous agreement amongst the trustees that were sitting on the board last time, which hasn't been raised, but I would like to add that to a question, is really about, the use of the public money. And I think Omar raised it in the beginning, which is where we went in circles last time, is why one organization, not another? And help us, if you were to walk in our shoes, to answer that question. It's not whether this is a great idea or the best idea. It is whether, for us to understand the relationship and to understand more clearly the relationship with the larger organization. And the thing that came up last time is this Ossining only. For me as a trustee, it didn't matter so much. It was going to be headquartered in Ossining. I thought it was a fantastic idea, but it did come up to complete the circle that Omar asked about what happened last time. There were some questions raised about, well, this isn't actually all for Ossining. Some of the other programs mentioned earlier as being similar actually were predominantly, I think, for residents of Ossining, whether it's youth or whatever. That came up. I didn't care so much about it, but I do want to at least complete that circle and get an answer and add that as one of the questions that is being circulated. I would find that helpful. So I really do thank you for the presentation. I wasn't aware of some of the background, to be honest. I haven't spoken to Abby or Henry about this, so I'm really glad that we were able to do that tonight.
May I?
Oh yeah, Manny, please.
Thank you. Henry, Abby, it's always good to see you guys. It's been a while, obviously, since we talked, and I'm glad to see what actually you guys been up to. It's very exciting. Actually, I was very supportive back then, about a year ago or more, and I'm supporter of this program now. I think one of the things that we always looked, at least in my head, is how do we help businesses? How do we help local businesses as a whole to bring into our community? And I think what you have proposed a year ago, the concept hasn't changed. Your partnership has changed, and that I'm actually glad to see that you partner with someone local from Westchester. So that's always a plus. We had a couple questions in regards, at that time, why this corporation, but that's irrelevant at this point. One of the things that the mayor, you forgot to mention on the program that we were funding to take place in the library was, it was actually, it was based on a grant program that Westchester County had. And we weren't actually supposed to be funding the whole program. It was more like a partial of that. And we ended up funding the whole program for the next 3 years. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind as well. Is what is the benefit that this will bring to our community? And me personally, I think will bring a lot of benefits. In regards to the Spanish community, I know early on, after we passed the resolution back sometime last year, Abby and Henry, we talked, and I know there was a couple local businesses and between the village and the town, I believe, that you guys were in touch. They were Spanish. And I'm hoping that the relationship is still there. One of the biggest struggles right now in our community is how do we keep local businesses alive, with this pandemic? What is the tools that you have? How do we help them? That's one of the things that we always, we talked about in the past in a couple work sessions before. How do we help our downtown, the businesses around downtown? How do we help the businesses in the upper part of our community? How do we help our businesses local-wise? We see our other communities that, they close the streets, and how do they do that? They actually been doing that with local funds. That's the, Tarrytown actually is funding about $40,000 of their budget to close the streets there. How do I know that? Because I spoke to them a couple of weeks back. So there's a lot of things that other municipalities do that to help their businesses in general. So I'm still in favor. I'm happy to talk to you guys offline and see if there's other concerns. Right now, I really, to me, it's the same model that we had last time. It hasn't changed. The partnership has changed. Obviously, the amount is less than what you were asking before. The percentage is the same, but the amount is less. I'm sorry. So I'm okay with this, and how do we move forward from that, and what other ways can we help? Obviously, help you talk, the relationship with other businesses. That's I'm looking forward to have an open dialogue with that. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Manny. I just want to say that yes, the relationship has changed, but in some ways, in a very important way, they're still the same. So everything that we talk about, our program has been modeled on our friends at E4All and the proven model they've had over 10 years. So what we get is access to all of those learnings, access to the unique way that they're delivering value. And frankly, we still have a very good, close relationship with the folks at E4All. So to your point, Manny, you get the benefit of it's much more local. We can deliver it at a lower cost, and that the insights and learnings are still there. I'd also just say change and disruption. I mean, COVID has reminded all of us at every part of life that change and disruption is here and upon us. But it's not just COVID, right? It's everything. The world around us has been changing at a faster and faster clip. And everything that we talk about is an entrepreneurial mindset, entrepreneurial skills, creative problem solving, turning a problem into an opportunity. All of these things are critical to our own little community, and actually thinking most creatively about how we address all of those things. It's also really critical that we don't just do it in a bubble that is only Ossining talking to Ossining. So we want it to be grounded here. We want wonderful, great representation, but we think inclusive also means making sure you've got great ideas and people coming from outside.
Okay, Bob.
Just quick, I know we have a heavy agenda. Henry, Abigail, thank you very much. I am one of the newer members, so I wasn't a part of the original discussion. This has been very informative, and I look forward to interior discussions with my colleagues so they can bring me up a little to speed to what's going on. And it sounds like a great thing. Right now, from what I'm hearing, I'm in support of it. I think it's great for the village, and I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. So I am not going to take that much time because I know we've got a busy night. So, but thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
All right, thanks all. We'll look forward to getting some more feedback from you via email, and then we'll figure out what the next steps can be.
Would Victoria, just on the process, would it be possible for the board to, after you talk privately, to get together and give us a list of questions so that we are responding to what you collectively want to know even after this presentation? I
feel like we expressed quite a number of questions tonight that you should probably just use as your list of what to respond.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, wonderful. So Omar, you said you were going to send it into an email as well as you rattled it off. I took notes, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, I'll email it to you.
Thank you so much. Mayor and board, thank you. Trustees, thank you very much for having us tonight. And to our cohort who joined, thank you guys for being here. And again, thank you guys for making for us the launch of COVID not quite as painful as it would have been. You guys are awesome, so thank you.
And thanks to Ann and Nikki for joining as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we thank you, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks very much, folks.
Take care. Thank you.
All right, as lots of people click off, we are going to be moving on. And Karen, I'll let you introduce our next discussion about the comp plan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We will be discussing next our comprehensive plan. Specifically, the board was received parts 2 and 3 of the environmental assessment form. And this is an important component of the SEEKR process, which is SEEKR is State Environmental Quality Review Act. And these are terms that are thrown around a lot in the planning world, and we've been discussing them a lot at the comprehensive plan steering committee meetings and with the board. But just so people understand, this is an act that requires state and local governments to consider environmental impacts in addition to social and economic impacts when they are taking an action. And in this case, we're talking about actions that would pertain to zoning, land use planning. So we are here to talk about our consultants from BFJ, and our Director of Planning, Jaime Martinez, are here to talk to the board about this process specifically.
Jaime, would you like me to start, or would you like to?
Yeah, I can start. So,
okay, great.
Just real briefly, you know, today we're talking about the EAF Part 2 and Part 3. You know, as we've kind of gone over this quite a few times with the board, but essentially the environmental review process for a comprehensive plan is something that has to be, you know, very well thought out, very well developed. And so throughout the seeker process, there's kind of three basic steps that you follow. You either have a short form, you have a long form that is a little bit more involved for bigger pieces, and then you have an EIS. And with an EIS, the scope of that EIS it can be pretty significant. But in order to follow seeker, you have to kind of make a decision on the long form and pos decet or neg decet. So essentially determine whether or not you think that the action that you're about to take is going to be pretty significant or not. And so this is kind of just an early stage in that process. The work that's been done at this point is pretty much a cursory review. The EIS is really where the deep environmental investigation goes. So I don't want to get too much into details. Maybe Frank can give a little bit more of a better synopsis than that. But that's kind of the gist of why we're here today.
Yeah, no, I'd just add to what Jaime said very briefly that you have before you, I hope, you've all gotten the Part 2 of the EAF and the Part 3. So where we are in the process now with seeker is that you already have declared yourself lead agency, and that we all expected because you are the only ones who can be the lead agency under state law. You have the power to adopt the plan and the zoning. And so you've done Part 1, and Part 2 just tries to evaluate, are there some impacts that are moderate or large? It's a state form, and we filled out a draft of that, which we initially shared with both Karen and Stuart. We've made some revisions to that. You have a final form before you, and it does check off that there are two, you know, possible impacts in the future. One could be transportation, another could be impacts on facilities, namely schools. So that would give you the basis, if you wish to, in Part 3, do what's called a positive declaration and move forward with a full EIS. We don't expect, I think, I'll just defer to Stuart on this, we don't expect any decision tonight. Tonight was just if you had questions on the process, you know, where the process is and where we're going with it, we'd be open to answering those questions.
I just want to clarify my understanding from as I'm looking at the form and as you were sort of distilling it down, it's more than 2 yeses. Transportation is one, but then also I'm working backwards now. I'm on page 10. Consistency with community character is a yes.
Well, actually, we had to, under community character is schools. So what we noted on that is really that we see schools have raised in the past their issues of capacity. So we thought that might be the issue to look at. So we've actually, I think, Mayor, let me double check that on page 10. I think, yes, you're correct. Consistency with community character, but the issue there we're looking at basically is schools. That's the first one that's checked, or I should say the second. It's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're saying that because there's a checkbox in the moderate to large impact may occur, because then there are others that have a yes.
That is correct.
There's other ones that have a yes, but it's always, you're checking all no or small impact.
That's correct. So what this form is meant to do is, if you were to check everything in the category of no or small impact, that is indicating a decision that you would be making, that this would result in a negative declaration. That is, that there are no significant adverse impacts that are a potential here, and you would make a negative declaration, and that would be the end of it. So what we have done to give you the option of doing a full EIS is checked off 2 of these. One is on impacts, which you just noted, Mayor, and basically we see that as schools, and then the other one we checked off was traffic, as moderate to large.
Right, because then there's a couple of other categories, like impact on critical environmental areas, where you check a yes, but there's only a couple of check mark options there where you still say no or small impact. So sort of, I guess, acknowledging that there's likely to be a small impact, but that in itself wouldn't be justification for there to be a positive declaration.
That's right. That's how the state law is set up. They have you, by the way, this is not our form, as you know, this is the state's form. So what we've done is simply go through it and try to put ourselves in the position of a comprehensive plan by itself, for instance, isn't going to directly result in the construction of a building. So it's not like a site-specific evaluation. So the 2 things we did see came down to transportation and schools. There may be others, by the way. This is just to discuss it with you initially. But many of the others, we did check a no or a yes, but small to moderate impact.
Yeah, the other guesses, but small to moderate impact, is historical architecture, and then impact on flooding. So there's a couple of, so then I know we've talked so much about process and
yeah.
And so my question would be next, what point in the stage do we send this to some of those interested parties? Like, there's questions about environmental impact. And people, the EAC is one of the potentially interested parties. And I hope I'm using interested properly, because I've been involved. I know there is a distinction.
I think at the stage would be, I think we may be scheduled for you to act on these on September 2nd, if I have that right, Karen. At that point, if you declare this to be a positive declaration, that is, you would like to do a full EIS, then the first thing that seeker says, and now it's mandatory, is you must hold a scoping process, an opportunity for the public to comment on the scope. And that might happen perhaps in October. So you would want that to go out to any interested agencies. We'd want that to go out for their comment and for their ability to speak at a scoping session. So that would be the time.
So if we didn't declare this a positive declaration, we'd never hear from any of those interested groups?
No. Seeker doesn't require
well,
that.
I want to clarify that when we're talking about this is the environmental review of this. It's not like we wouldn't talk to those groups about the comprehensive plan as it goes. That conversation needs to take place. The actual environmental review process has to take place as well. So they're related, but they are separate things. So the EAC still needs to be spoken to, regardless of whether we theoretically didn't do a pause deck. But I don't think that's where it's heading at this point.
May, are you done, or did you have more? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
She's far away from the mic. She said you can go.
Oh, okay. So I just want to recap so that I understand. So today, you're having a conversation. We're not making decisions. You're looking for the board can vote on the positive and negative, and has to vote. The question at hand is that you have filled out the form to your abilities based on feedback and input that you have received as the consultants. it doesn't preclude us from then looking at these forms saying, gee, you know, I think this actually is a large issue or a small issue. But even if we didn't do that, if we simply came to the vote and said we want to declare this positive, meaning a deeper environmental review, that's really what we have to do. We are the only agency, and we are the only ones that vote on whether this should be a positive, negative. Positive means a higher level review in plain English. It would go to the AC, it seems to me, regardless, because that's actually part of the process. But whether it goes to other stakeholders involved in environmental issues and how that affects, specific to that headline, a positive, I forgot the next word, would cause that to happen. Is that about right? Did I recap that so that what we're being asked to do here?
Yeah, I think,
yes.
I think you've recapped it well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So there's no action being asked of us today in any
No,
case.
it was
It's a
just,
presentation, it's a status
yeah.
update presentation.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I? Thank you. So thanks for all this. You know, obviously we just got this early this afternoon, kind of browsed through it. And I do have a couple questions in regards to some of the areas in here that I think may be concerned, but we can do it offline. One of the things that I do have a question that I would like to get an answer on this is in part 3. You know, the name of the lead agency is obviously the village board. My question is, and nothing against, please forgive me, Karen, it says the name responsible officers for the lead agency, and then names are candidatory as the person in charge. If we are the lead agent, and maybe you said this before and I apologize, shouldn't be maybe the mayor at this point? Or how would that work? Or how does it work?
I think that seeker allows, and I would also defer to Stuart on how you normally do it, but seeker allows some discretion here. I believe that it could be Karen as your manager because she is the village manager, but it also could be the mayor. That's up to, I think it's pretty much up to you. And I would defer to Stuart if he has any, other experience there. We've seen mayors sign this. We've also seen village managers sign it. We've had, in some cases, legal counsel, and in some cases, us on behalf of the village. But I think it's best if either the manager or mayor.
So Stuart, let me ask you a quick question then. When the planning board is the lead agency for any of those, who signs that?
It could be, again, either the manager or it could be the planning board chair. Seeker doesn't mandate that any particular person sign it, but you must be, in a position to represent the lead agency.
So Stuart, in the past, when we had the planning board be the lead agent, who is the person named as the officer of the lead agency at that point?
I would double check, but I believe it's been the planning board chair.
Okay, all right.
And just so it's noted, this is the only reason this becomes of any significance is that with a positive declaration, you have to file all this with what's called the Environmental Notice Bulletin, ENB, and that gets published on a website. You can see it, and on there will be the name of the contact person who can be contacted by people in other municipalities or who are just reading it. So that's where that comes from.
I agree with that. Karen, she can get all the emails, I'm assuming. So I'll defer to that.
It's at the discretion of the board.
If folks want, the mayor at villageofossining.org email address also goes to the manager's office. Jamie Hoffman receives those. So maybe we just list that as the email address, and that way I'll get it and somebody in the manager's office would get it, and then we can have a consistent lead agency officer responsible be me as representing the Board of Trustees, but it helps have some redundancy in who's taking a look at those emails when they come in. And then when it's not me, it can be Rika. When we transition. Are people comfortable with that?
I'm okay with that. I mean, to me, and I know it's something small, but if the board is the representative, the lead agents, I figure a member of the board should be the agent, the lead agent for this. I'm just, you know.
I didn't actually even, until Manny, you brought it up, I wasn't even looking at it, so I don't really have an opinion about it. I think either way is fine. I think I want to focus on the other piece. I mean, it's consistent, so I could see your point.
So on September 2nd, we're going to be asked to vote on either a positive or negative declaration. And when we've spoken about this in the past, there's been something of an expectation that it would be a positive declaration. And what I'm walking away from this conversation tonight with is the feeling that because the comprehensive plan is such a significant step, regardless of what boxes are checked, when we have an opportunity for greater scrutiny, greater public awareness, greater formal input being given to us by interested parties, I'd generally be leaning toward that, regardless of what boxes are checked. So I'm glad that there are at least a couple of boxes that have already been identified that would justify that step. And I don't know that we're going to discuss this again as a board before September 2nd. So I think it's important that if people have questions or comments on that front, that you raise them now while we have Frank and Jaime here.
Oh, geez, I didn't realize we were going to do that. For me, it's always been very obvious. This is a huge project. It's in public land. I mean, this is not a private developer of any kind. I mean, I think to our conversation way in the beginning, the whole idea is to have, stakeholder and public meetings. This would allow to have public input, any opportunity for public input. For me, I'm supportive of a positive declaration because I think that this needs to go through the right steps without any doubt or and full transparency. You'd want to. So, I mean, I wasn't having this conversation because for me it was sort of apparent. I thought that's where we're heading from when Jaime spoke last time about all this, that the magnitude of this would even justify it. So I didn't feel it was really actually needed a whole lot of discussion, but that's where I'm going to be heading on this.
So Rika and I are obviously both supportive of a positive declaration. Is there anybody who feels differently about that? Bob, if you're speaking, I can't hear you. You're muted.
I don't think he's talking to us. I don't.
Okay. All right. So we're all generally supportive of, for whatever your rationale is, that good. Okay. That the opportunity to declare this as a positive declaration on September 2nd sounds like the next step. And then that'll be the next step after that will be to share everything with some of those interested parties and get some engagement. Right?
Yeah, Mayor, may I just make one point, Frank? I apologize.
Yes, no, go ahead, Stuart.
The size of the project, while this is a comprehensive plan, is not a determining factor in whether or not you have a positive or a negative declaration. The issue is whether there will be a significant adverse environmental impact. That's what you look at. So as Jaime was pointing out, it's separate from the comprehensive plan hearing that you will be having, that both the steering committee must have and that this board must have. This is part of the environmental review process. And what people will be getting if there is a positive declaration is will be a draft scoping document. That will be the subject of comments, both written and oral at a hearing. And that will then, you create from that the final scope, which is used for the creation of the environmental impact statement. But size alone does not make a determinant as to whether or not it is to be a positive or a negative declaration. I just wanted that to be out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. The only thing I was going to add is, given what the trustees have just said, that you are leaning clearly to the positive declaration, what I thought we would do is give to Karen and Stuart and Jaime a proposed scoping document so that you have that, before September 2nd also. So if you make that positive declaration, then if you wish, once you make the positive declaration, the first step in an EIS is to hold a scoping session, notify all the interested agencies, get it out into the public, and give the public a chance to comment. so we can get that to you before the 2nd.
One quick question that I do have is, do you just need a majority to get a public declaration to 3 of us?
Yes, just a majority.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Well, with that, then I think we can move on to item number 3. We are a good hour and a half into our meeting, so but you definitely helped with the rate of progress. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor. Next up is we have our Recreation Advisory Board has been very, very busy. They are an active group, and they really oversee our recreation center, provide significant guidance and strategic input. And they've recently toured all of our parks and have a presentation that they've put together. Pat Yost is here from the Rec Advisory Board, as is Bill Garrison. So welcome, Pat and Bill, and we're very interested to see this presentation. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. So, Bill, do you want to say anything to kick it off, or should I just jump in?
I just, this was something that we had talked about for a long time since I've been here, about getting some plans ahead for our parks. So the board has worked hard over the past year doing this. So, and Pat's got a good presentation here, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. All right. Thanks. So I'm gonna just I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen, and feel free to jump in as you go. Oops, hold on. So if y'all could just confirm that you see the presentation, and
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That looks
Okay.
great, Pat. Thank you.
Okay. No
Welcome.
problem. No problem. So this is I believe that there's a version of this that was shared this afternoon. I am not going to go through the whole document. I'm going to focus on the first 8 or 9 pages or so, just to give you all an overview, and then feel free to at your leisure peruse some of the park specific details. But starting on page 2, for the first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. Mayor and board and everybody else that's on. Just to recap what Bill and Karen had said. So, the Recreation Advisory Board is actually, it's an interesting entity because it's actually a combination of village and town representatives. So, so I'm working with Jackie to actually have a similar presentation to the town representatives, because we did look at all of the park space across both the town and the village. And as an advisory board, what the Rec Advisory Board does is, it recommends policies, and it recommends, strategies, and focuses on parks, and then, helps with support and interpretation of, the policies and the functions of the Recreations and Park Department, right? Bill is the chairperson of the board, and I know he works and provides input to y'all on a regular basis. There are also 2 nominated liaisons. So Rika is the liaison between the board and from a village, and the Rec Advisory Board from a village perspective, and then Jackie Shaw is the liaison to the town board. All right. So what we did was, this really came up over a year ago at this point, where the board was kind of looking, and we were doing sort of an annual tour of a couple of different locations, and we were able to kind of say, hey, look, we haven't really done a comprehensive survey, and one of the things that we really should be doing as an advisory board and as a board which is providing recommendations is saying, hey, what's our perspective on the current the current parks in the area. Let's go, let's take a look at current use, let's look at conditions, I see if there are any immediate issues that we suggest are addressed, and then make some recommendations around, hey, what are the long-term, potential long-term visions for the different park space that we have. And then clearly, we spent a fair amount of time doing that. We took a look at, most of the parks at this point. There are a couple small ones that we haven't gotten to yet, but really kind of consolidate that into a single document that's useful for both the village board, the town board, and it just so happens that both the village and the town are also going through the comprehensive planning committee. So I think this is a great, document that the comprehensive planning teams can also use to support the local infrastructure and the local parts of the comprehensive plan. All right. Fairly significant. You can see, I'm not sure if everyone knows all of the parks that are part of the village and in the town, but it's fairly significant. The reality is that, between the village and the park, there's almost 150 acres of parkland within the village and the town, right? So the right-hand side's mislabeled. That's the town side, but the village has about 50 acres and the town has about 100 acres. So it's a really significant and a fantastic asset that the people can use. And I think every day, especially over the last 6 months, you can, once people have been able to start to get out a little bit, you can see how much it's used, and you can see how it really is a value to the town and the village, and to people getting out and about and exercising and providing some mental sanity, right? It really is fantastic. This is just a map that we put in there just to help people understand where the different parks are across the geography, and it really is kind of it's really spread across the place. Right? I think our key takeaways at this point are fairly good. One, I think the board is the Recreation Advisory Board is really kind of clear that we're really, really bullish on the parks that we have. It's a great resource. They get a lot of use, but there's even more opportunity to leverage what's out there and to improve on some of the things and improve some of the some of the short-term items. The parks are generally in great shape. Some items needing some quick correction due to potential safety issues, and most of those have been actually starting to be addressed already. Bill's been really good in terms of kind of take in feedback from the public, however it gets to them, whether it's through the social media or directly through the parks group. From that perspective, we went through and we identified what we felt as potential long-term vision and uses for the primary parks, and provide some comments on things relative to what we think is that. And in the appendix section of this document, there are for each park, there's a fairly specific page which goes into a little bit of detail in terms of what did we see when we visited the park, what do we think is a good long-term vision, and what are some specific action items that could be taken into play, right? From that perspective. One of the things we didn't address just yet, we didn't talk about, but we do think that there are some additional questions that I know that the Rec Advisory Board wants to start talking about. Some questions around, and not purely just the physical aspect of it, but how open is access? I think that's really become a question a little bit more recently around, is it just town and village? How non-residents do we, and if that, what's managed, how's it enforced, how's it monitored? Especially in the COVID days, there's significant questions around how do enforce social distancing? Do you enforce social distancing? Do you, from that perspective? And I know that there's been some changes recently around, how, especially down at the waterfront perspective, how's that managed? And, do you have some people on hand over the weekend to sort of help with that? And then, the other item that this specifically does not talk about at this point in time is, are there other operating suggestions for park facilities or the the recreation facility from that perspective? All right. Let me stop right there. Any questions so far? I'm doing a lot of talking. Sir?
Pat, sorry, quick question. If
Yes.
you were to, just as a general, I don't know, I mean, I know it doesn't mean anything at the end of the day, because I see it as Austin in itself, not as a town or village. But
Yes.
if it's slide before that, it's slide 4, I guess. You have village parks.
Yep.
But there's a lot of town parks there as well. Would it be?
Yeah, that was a typo on the right-hand side. Those are the
All
town
right.
parks.
Okay, got it.
Yes,
That was it. That was it for now. Yes, thank you.
Good catch.
Yep. So, all right.
My question is, if you go forward.
Yeah.
To the last slide that you showed. Yeah. Nope. Before that.
Sorry.
Yeah. The additional long-term questions. Those are just open questions that you have that you don't have any answers to, or do you have any kind of additional thoughts on those?
Not right now. I just wanted to make sure that those are kind of make sure that y'all know that those are topics that, the Recreation Advisory Board has identified as something to make sure we talk about, right? And bring some recommendations. We've been focused on the physical side of it at this point, primarily because even though budget's tight these days, you're coming into the budget season, right? And one of the things that we wanted to make sure happened on an appropriate time frame was, we gave you input as you start thinking about, where are you investing over the course of, to follow up on the investment question, where does the money go, and how does, if you do have parks money in the budget for next year, what does the Recreational Advisory Board put in as a suggestion as to some places that we feel are good uses of that money, right? So we focused in, from a timing perspective, we focused in on that. And now I think we're going to spend a little bit more time focusing on some of the questions around access and management from that standpoint.
Got it. Sorry, Rico, just one quick follow-up. One quick follow-up is around garbage. So some of the parks, I don't know, I haven't done a survey of which parks do and don't have garbage cans, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about how garbage is managed, particularly for parks that don't have garbage cans.
Yeah. So I think that, for me, that falls into, I think I've seen garbage cans at all of the parks that I've been at, right? I think, much more recent sort of perspective. What I saw from the pictures, like down at the waterfront, where there was kind of stuff overflowing, for me, I viewed that as just a capacity question, quite honestly. Because, like, for me, when I saw those pictures on social media around what was the garbage down there, what I saw was that people tried to get it in the garbage area.
Right. No, and that makes sense. I'm more thinking about a park, and it's on your list as one that you haven't visited yet, but Dale Avenue Park does not have garbage cans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. But I think that's a pretty easy fix, right?
I wanted to point out that while they were longer term, the committee, I mean, this took a while. They've been to almost every park. There was lots of discussions about many issues, but when they put the presentation together, they wanted to hone in on 3 key issues. And garbage and stuff was actually discussed under enforcement and monitored and then operational. So there is more detail, but as a group, if 1 or 2 people really have strong feelings, it probably didn't make this list. It was really a group decision to say, let's have a focused presentation on headline items. So like the open, is it open to everybody, whether they live here or not? It also included like conversation about different teams and, private instructors that collect money and while using the parks for yoga classes that they charge for, they use public. So there are like lots of really in-depth and certainly if anybody on this board wants to have specific conversation, I know Pat and the rest of the board, if you want to make a visit to one of the meetings, I'm sure that there could be more in-depth. They did an amazing job, like in a very democratic way of bringing, it's a very vocal group, of bringing in lots of opinions into, you gave me the double thumbs up because I'm understating it. And I mean that as you all know me, I love that. That it's a very vocal group, but they really tried to say, look, at a board meeting, what are the three? Like, let's pick up the headlines. So if anybody wants more detail about any one topic, I know that it is highly welcome. And I don't mean tonight, but as a follow-up is the liaison. Jackie is the liaison. She was previously a chair before she was an elected official. Happy to have that conversation, and by email or by phone or anything. I know Pat and would be very happy to.
So,
thank you.
Yep. All right. Keep on going through. One of the things that we did do is page 7 is we just to kind of help summarize for people what's available at the different parks, because the reality is that there's an awful lot that's going on at a lot of different parks, and for people who aren't very in the parks all day every day, I think this is just a kind of a good summary of what's available, and I think that it's pretty impressive that there are very significant amount of activities that are encouraged and physically and supported across the town and the village. Right, I think it's great. This is good. This is going to be a what I call a living document, and I think as things get updated or things get upgraded or things get added or changed, this is appropriate to keep up to date. Okay.
Yeah, Pat, just one quick question. Go back to that. Yeah, Vets Park.
Yes.
Fishing. It's not checked off. Is there a reason for that, or is it just?
I've never seen anybody fishing in it.
Really?
I don't. Yep.
Okay. And
okay, we can check it off. That's
no.
that's exactly.
I mean,
this is a living document, like you said, right? So.
Like I say, it's not a. I mean, you're not catching trophy fish here, but the father takes his kid up there with his new little plastic fishing pole, and they have a little, it's an option. It's there. They're catching sunnies or putting a piece of corn on a hook.
Because I don't think there's actually a dock there either, right?
No, there's no dock
from the side. Yeah.
But, again, you just struck an idea as an option to something to go there.
Yeah. Right. Because I do think that's for Wishney, for example, there is, that there are fish in there, and there is some one of the things we thought for that specifically would be
there's
like,
big fish in there.
Yeah, there are. Was kind of like wildlife education, right? So you can you can put a couple of things that on the walkway, or there is
right. You have that one little one at Wishney. You have that one little landing by the water tank. It's something that could be expanded on.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea. Thanks. So, okay, I appreciate that. So to focus on some of the town, the village specific pieces, right? So just kind of give you a sense of some of the town specific, the village specific, right? So clearly Nelson Park, really heavily used. We're really excited about how much it gets used, and a huge variety of activities. And I guess our vision for that was continue to be a multi-use, family-friendly, and I think there are some opportunities to even expand what's available there, right? There's some open spaces between the baseball field and the street where you may be able to do something like a sand volleyball. There's some space potentially for picnic facility. The lighting is on the basketball court, and the recent upgrade of the basketball court has been, I think, fantastic in terms of both extending the usability and reducing the I'm going to call it the environmental impact of the lights, because they're so directed. Is fantastic. We also thought that there could be other places where that low impact lighting might be in use, right? Maybe the tennis courts, maybe somewhere else down in the park area. One of the things we thought was kind of interesting was that that walking area gets a significant amount of use, and something that might be interesting for kind of both younger and older folks is to put some sort of a walking loop with some other workout items, right? Almost like not really a parkour course, but just some stations around the way that would make that loop even more physically active, right?
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking about that, and Wishney, some low impact workout stations.
Yeah.
Around.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other place actually is there actually used to be one over at Ryder Park, and that's actually includes some hills, and so that's the I think that was a similar recommendation we've got for Ryder, which I'll talk about with the town. Nelson Sitting Park is, I mean, it's a gorgeous property, right? Kid friendly walking, got the nice park in the middle there. We think that that's right the way it is in terms of focus on that. With some minor changes can significantly improve that, potentially some sort of a minor performance stage to encourage local community performance or arts down there, which is in keeping with, I think, a significant focus for the village. And it is a sitting park, but there are a bunch of benches missing, just simply due to age and stuff. So our recommendation was to try to make an investment in putting some of those, making sure that those are there. And I believe there's already some focus on trying to improve the plantings there as well to continue to green up the space some more. Veterans Park is huge park, right? That's the biggest one from a village perspective. Multi-sport use, baseball, softball, soccer gets a significant amount of use there, and felt that there could be some improvements to that kind of central pavilion and parking area to really sort of improve the usability of it. Even there's potential rental opportunity if that central pavilion is cleaned up a little bit. The bathrooms there could use a little bit of work, but our view is that seems to be the right kind of use for that space, and it's really tough to make any really huge substantive changes to that to change the use profile for that. During the summer, and it's currently getting a lot of use with the youth baseball and the youth softball, and then in soccer season, both the upper and the middle fields get used pretty significantly as well. Snowden's a neat space. The skate park and the basketball mix, the recently upgraded playground are really nice, and we felt that and I think this is already underway, that upgrading the skate park and the basketball court, refurbishing that, cleaning that up, as well as some of the bathrooms and improving the accessibility there from a handicap perspective is the right investment to make at that space. Because the skate park is pretty unique, and that's another, it's a nice basketball facility that gets used down there pretty regularly. There are some questions about the baseball field. The fencing needs significant work down there, the backstop. There's not very little. There's no spectator protection along the third baseline from batted balls and things like that. So that's needs some significant investment there. And there have been some discussions around, can you turn that into small court soccer or something like that? The field down there, which, there have been significant interest in, this kind of small field soccer, volleyball, pickleball, to expand the audience potentially for that space. And I know that that's one of the discussions that's been going on for about a year now, but, we think that fundamentally, if you have to invest, $40,000 in a backstop and fencing to improve the baseball and softball field to make it really safe and up to snuff, is $40,000 for the baseball field, right? Or, do you spend that $40,000 down there and expand its usability to more sports and to broader demographic there. So that our perspective was that there's probably, retasking that sum is probably a better use from a broad village perspective. Henry Gorndine really like what's been done down there. Maintain the up at access. That was the biggest thing that came out of our group discussions. It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place to have events. I can see that some people might want to do like weddings and stuff down there, but from our perspective, the recommendation is that, yes, we can allow it, but it needs to be in a small space, and you can't close down the park when you do it. So people just need to deal with that from that perspective, and identify long-term programming options for the park and the pagoda and the central area there, where like last year, I think we had the Big House Barbecue down there, and that's a really kind of a neat meeting space, and one of the very, from a village perspective, the open access to the river is fantastic. Okay. Clearly there needs to be an integration of the waterfront plan and with the town plan for Lewis Angle, right? There's a significant amount of work that I think they want to do over there, and those two places are fundamentally contiguous, and it needs to be integrated. Okay. Crop Rocky, great. Need to just improve the parking and the signage a little bit, some trail maintenance. I know there's a bunch of work that has to get done down there after the storm. I think there was a fairly significant some damage from that perspective. So that was that. And then Wishney, we talked about that already, right? It's heavily used. Walking paths constantly in use. It's a great gateway to the village from the western part of town. That's the other thing that we talked about actually from down at Henry Gordine. That's a great gateway to the village from the river, right? And so we suggested some additional signage down there, kind of, they're welcome to Ossining signs all over the place, but there isn't one coming off the ferry. Which is, you get some fairly significant traffic there on a daily basis once the commuting picks up again. And so felt it's like another gateway that we can improve. The ones down at the bottom, Arthur Jones, Dale, Sparta, William Street, Totlaw, the primary local playground facilities, which absolutely need to be maintained and continue from a use perspective along those. We think those are really key to, just livability within, sort of the urban environment that we've got, and it's really important to have those for everybody. Right. This is really just like a summary of some of the key high-level comments for each of the park areas. I'll show you really quickly what we've got for each of the parks. Each of the parks, we have a page like this, which talks about key activities, kind of some vision points, and then a section around observations and comments and potential projects, right? So for each of the parks, this is what we've got in detail, and I'm not going to go through those in detail tonight. That would eat up all the night. All right. Suggested next steps from our perspective were that, continue to review the parks not completed. There are a couple of the smaller ones, right? We're doing some of the reporting to you, the village now, the town. Frank, happy to have a conversation with anybody from the comprehensive planning committee to go through this, whatever you and Jaime think are the right way to get the information to the group, whatever makes sense. Want to make sure that happens. And then, I think the, kind of like the so what, right, is, this particular piece was, hey, for Recreation Advisory Board, what do we think are some of the priorities? And so we've got, a list of some of the priorities for each of the parks. And then we went through the last meeting and did a little bit of discussion around what we're, of everything that we've got, what do we think are some of the most important ones? We kind of put them out there for you. Nelson, we really think the bathroom in the sitting areas can the sitting area can be improved a bit. The sitting part, the benches and the trees. Veterans Park updates the pavilion and the bathroom, that central area there are really key, I think, to improving the kind of usability of that. And then Snowden, those are already underway, right? The basketball and the court repairs for the bathrooms perspective. We felt that would be quick, kind of easy, quick wins that would be a visible and significant difference to the people in the village, right? Then we've got some for Ryder, and then we'll continue to discuss the Rec Advisory Board long-term questions on use and monitoring. That's from a board perspective. That's on us as a takeaway for the Rec Advisory Board, and that's on the agendas. So I think from your perspective, as you go, I think clearly we know money's tight and need to carefully think about where to invest, but I think the ask is, as you start to think about long-term plans, you start to think 2, 3, 4 years out in terms of capital, and where do you put maintenance money, where do you put capital money, and what are the sources of some of that, right? Because I think that with the lights down at Nelson and potentially some of the money from down at Snowden, I think the in lieu of Parkland funds, in lieu of Park Improvement Fund is probably close to depleted at this point, right? So, you know, what are potential sources to help fund some of the improvements and the continue investment in what is, you know, currently a great asset for the village from that perspective, and keep it going from that standpoint. And then I think the last piece, the last page I wanted to talk about, and this is another kind of living document. Bill owns this right now. And I think it's important that, okay, if we put together a list of potential things to kind of, hey, what are some of the improvements? You know, hey, here's a high level, you know, what are some of the improvements, what are some of these might cost, right? And then, you know, hey, as the conversation happens and it says, oh, okay, we've got X amount of money, you know, the rec advisory board could say, oh, well, maybe we think that, you know, recommend A and B. In that scenario, I think this is the kind of, we're in a place where we can have that sort of real-time fact-based dialogue based on the work that we've done to kind of take this survey and take the, you know, take a look at all the information, think about what the vision might be for the parks and recreation, for the parks. So I think that's it. So I'm not going to go past this because the rest of it is all of the details on a park place, and that would, like I said, that would take forever. So let me stop there and open up for questions, and I'll stop sharing so that everybody can look. Any questions?
I'll start with
I'll go ahead.
So thank you for this information. The parks that we have, I find to be incredibly useful, beautiful, helpful. I appreciate that we have them, and I appreciate this review. As you're thinking about them, one thing that I didn't see too much of was accessibility. So generally, the parks are pretty accessible for folks that have handicaps or other disabilities, but I'd be curious if there are any adjustments that make sense to make them more friendly for folks that may have a physical disability, maybe blind or deaf or something like that. That's it. Thank you.
I think that there were some specific places we saw some changes that could be made, right? One, the bathrooms down at Snowden. There's a specific area where it's very difficult. You can't get from the top to the bottom, and you can't get from the baseball field area to the bathrooms if you're in a wheelchair without going in the street. That's just not right. I think the other place out at Ryder, getting around that middle area with the playground is a challenge. So for example, you know, there are kind of like 3 tiers to that, right? There's the what I call the baseball tier. There's the tennis court / basketball court tier, and you know, so there's challenges getting from place to place there. And I think that, you know, Rika, well, that's a town one, right? But Cedar Lane's got some challenges. Cedar Lane has some challenges as well.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of getting around and up and down some of those hills.
Well, except that when we did Cedar Lane, so the community garden and the bottom part is very accessible.
It's very accessible, yes.
Very accessible. Richard Wishney Park, I think a year ago, they did straighten out so that people in a wheelchair can have access. There's a way to drive in and go fishing, because before you couldn't get a wheelchair without sort of sliding down, or at least I guess it was dangerous, and they actually built it in a way that a wheelchair and a caretaker next to it could actually do some fishing or with a child or stuff. So I thought that was sort of cool. The dog park, you could drive all the way up to the dog park, so that's highly accessible if you're handicapped and you have a pet. So there were some, and I think Omar's question is something we should add maybe to this ongoing live inventory, is the accessibility. Not sure that we know they exist. I'm not sure we walked around looking for it. So that might be something, Pat, so this group for years has been visiting parks in the summer. This is not the first visit. What's first here as an inventory and a presentation and documenting all these pieces. I would just add this to the document going forward to look for accessibility for, you know, handicap, anything else. That's sort of we should probably just look for that.
Great. Thanks.
Omar, you have any more questions? Okay, good, thanks. All right. And just kind of piggyback real quick on accessibility. A couple of years back, we did pass a law in our books where, any improvement that we do in our streets and sidewalks, they actually become ADA accessible, even with the bike lanes and stuff like that. So we do have that. Maybe probably that could be a model to kind of improve that within the parks itself.
Okay.
That being said, I see a lot of the budgets. I love parks. I have a 6-year-old going to 7, and sometimes she acts like 15 sometimes. She loves going to the parks. Unfortunately, because of the situation that we've been living in a couple past months, it's been very difficult to take her to a playground. That being said, because of our budget itself, what I noticed is a lot of the items in here are part of a capital improvement. Now, my recollection is a couple months back, we actually cut or suspended, I want to say, a lot of the capital improvements on this. So to me, is great information. Unfortunately, I'm sure that we can work with even with Rika, the village manager, in regards to what kind of improvements we've been looking for. But, I'm definitely not looking to spend some of the stuff that we already went through the capital project.
Yeah.
Not at this time, at least. As beautiful as it sounds, the parks, the soccer fields and things of that nature. Unfortunately, I will not be in support of spending taxpayers' money at this point of time in that. Now, if we can find different ways to improve our parks in small portions, I've definitely been supportive of that. But I think Pat, and I want to thank you and everybody that actually goes to these meetings and goes to the visits on the parks, for all the hard work that you guys do. It's very helpful for us, to better our community, to accessibility to all the parks throughout Ossining, which is great. So thank you.
No, thank you. And just to speak to that, I think, we started the process a year ago and the situation was very different, right? And I think we as a recreational advisory board are very cognizant and aware of the, both on a municipal, organizational, where we work and personal level, the challenges these days, right? It's, it's kind of up and down the chain. So we talked, we tried to talk a little bit about, what are some quick wins, right? And what are some ways that, you can make some immediate improvements that will be noticeable and, not necessarily, too overburdening, right? And that's where we came up with things like, the tree planting or the benches at Nelson Sitting Park, right? Some things that are, not too expensive, but stuff that can be done relatively, can be done, or even the bathrooms at Veterans Park, the building, you're not going to like raise the building down and do it all over, but you may be able to be creative and make a different experience in the bathrooms there, which will make it much more friendly, and people be much more willing to go there, because I know people don't go there because they're like, one, I'm not going to schlep all the way up to the top and use the porta potty, right, and stuff like that. So I think we tried to be, yes, there are some big ticket items in there, but I think we tried to be a little cognizant of, hey, there's probably some quick wins in here that might be doable. So
I happen to agree with Manny and the big ticket items. The one thing that stands out about every park that you spoke about that was substantial usage is bathrooms, and I believe there's one of your little things I think that should be addressed. The bathrooms are old, they're dated, and we're at a lifestyle now where wash your hands for 20 seconds, do this, hand sanitizers in there, more accessibility to them, maintaining them. They're dated. And I believe if anything needs to be worked on with what we're trying to offer to people to get out into the parks is have a nice bathroom at these parks. And that goes for every one of the parks. All those bathrooms are dated. And I think that would be something that would be more apt to be, I would be in favor of, in other words, versus going after, just a quick look at your list of things, there were some pretty big ticket things there. And I think we could probably, if we look into getting these bathrooms updated, you got what, veterans, you got Nelson, Lusingle, Ryder's very, when you're up by the pavilion, that's a very inaccessible bathroom, due to the ramp that you got to get up. But, but I believe that upgrading just the bathrooms inside, whatever it, takes to get them up to speed, and more up to date. Okay, like battery flushers and automatic flushers. Because people go in there and we know what happens. And people don't want to touch anything, and I don't blame them. So again, I would be in favor of that. That was a little thing to get taken care of throughout all the parks that had the bathrooms.
Got it. That makes sense. I think I don't know if you've been down to Lusingle recently, but the town crew really just did a total makeover on the bathrooms over at Lusingle. So go down and take a look at those, see what they did. So. Thanks. Yes.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I spend a lot of my time, a lot of my waking hours at our parks, talking around baseball fields and soccer fields, but today we were doing basketball and tennis at Nelson. I too would love to see some of these big ticket items at some point, but obviously that's not our reality right now. But I love your list of more attainable things that really will make good bang for our buck. And I would like from our staff to get an update at an upcoming meeting. You can just email it to us. When we talked about our capital projects, some of them are big ticket items that we were going to use the in lieu of, and we want to max out the use of the in lieu of parkland funds right now before we make use of the general funds. Because in lieu of parkland funds, for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, that can only be spent on upgrades to recreation and parks facilities and equipment. So we figured out we could do the pool upgrade, which is a really big ticket item. So that might take away a lot of the in lieu of parkland funds. But some of these other things like benches, like if for a few $1,000s, there's one woman in town who will she will just be so grateful. I hear from her every season. She wants more benches at Nelson Park. And I know she's not the only one. She's just, one person writes to you and asks for something more than once. She's representing a lot of other people. Nelson Park is such a well-utilized park for so many things. And I think the idea of, I don't play volleyball on any sort of surface, but volleyball, sand volleyball, if that's something that is feasible and people who know how that would work would make sense. I think you said, is that one of the, like an $8,000, ticket item? That's a pretty big amenity to add for less than 10 grand. That we do have a lot of people in our community who play volleyball, and it's not usually in that high visibility and welcoming a facility. So I love the list of some of these more attainable things, and I think we talked about some of the beautification at Nelson Sitting Park. I believe we have a grant. So that's is moving forward and is not going to be a major financial burden. Yep. So I really enjoyed your review. I would like to just spend the whole rest of the night going through this line by line, because this is it's just such a wonderful aspect of our community, and we have so much going on. And I'm going to check out the bathrooms at Lusingle now that they've been redone. I will say the bathrooms at the baseball end of Ryder are much better, and they've been doing incremental improvements over the year. Yep. Again, they're better than they were last season. So I'd love to borrow some of what they've been doing at, it sounds like, more than one of the parks bathrooms. We can incorporate that into Nelson is a little trickier because it's like a self-composting toilet and stuff. I don't think it's not fully plumbed like some of our other facilities. So right. Challenge to upgrade that to the same level, or it would just have to be a different approach. So what I'm hearing from everyone is sort of a consensus that we're not getting a $500,000 small soccer court facility in the coming year. Although I think that would ultimately be a wonderful facility for our community to end up paying for itself. I just don't think have the capital to be able to invest in it right now. But bathrooms, benches, plantings, maybe volleyball. I'm the only one who mentioned that, but it's at a price point that worth the consideration if you guys have thought it through and think it makes a lot of sense. As far as the comp plan steering committee, I'd ask the trustees who participate in that, trustees Lopez and Quesada, if it makes sense for this to either be shared as just an electronic document, or Pat, you're on the committee, right?
Yep.
So maybe you could upcoming agenda for you all to have some of the picture information shared.
Yeah. I think this would be valuable input for a couple of the chapters that are currently in process from that perspective. So I think so.
The last thing that I think or two last things that are quick that I'll mention is you mentioned the it would be great to have greater connectivity between our two waterfront parks, the town, Lewis and the villages, Henry Gordon. I was on those little field trips when we were looking at those parks when Henry Gordon was being built, and there was resistance, I won't say from whom, to open that up as much as possible. Nobody on this. To open that up as much as there was potential for us to the fence that is behind essentially the kiosk. Just 3 or 4 steps that lead right down to the OBCC. Sorry, the OBCC parking circle there, and that would really help facilitate some of these larger events. I mean, if we ever get the opportunity to go down to the waterfront and have some big events that span parks or more than 25 or 50 people, it would be nice to be able to have that greater connectivity. I absolutely agree. And maybe now that Henry Gordon Park has been in existence for a few years, we can revisit that, a year or two when we're back into financial position to be able to do that. And then the last thing that I just wanted to, maybe Bill could give us an update. I know some work done at Snowden for resurfacing, if that hasn't happened, it will be happening soon for the basketball court with a template that'll do all of the lines, and I think it's a different kind of surface. And then is it Vets up next?
Yeah, so the asphalt has been put down at the skate park and Snowden basketball, and we have the template and the hoops have been delivered. So we hope to get those in later this week and get the skate park apparatus back on there. So that'll be opening up soon, and Vets will be next to do that basketball court up there.
That's great.
And then the other update too is that the spray pad surface for the indoor spray pad at the community center is going to be installed the first week of September.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks. I think the just Mayor, to think the one piece that and to the whole board really, right? Like you said, I think the Recreation Advisory Board totally understands the financial position, but I think the important thing of at least knowing what's out there and knowing what some of the potential projects might be. Awareness is part of is knowing what's out there. If there is an opportunity that comes up for funding, from an external source or some grant money or whatever it might be, right? That knowing the projects and saying, oh, hey, look, hey, we've been through a process, we've identified something, here's something that can be that might be applied to, do we go do it or not? I think having the awareness is something that would really help kind of identifying creative sources of funding potentially and moving down the road, right? While we work through the current situation from that perspective. So I think that's part of the value that the rec board saw in putting together the list and making sure that it's out there.
So if there's so much on this list, from the very small to the very large, from the super fun and high profile to the more mundane and facility needs perspective. Does the Rec Advisory Board, were there like 3 things that you would want if we could fund these 3 things that are modest, not a $500,000 project, but like fidget off there. Whether that came from in lieu of parkland funds or general funds, or if it was a good candidate for a grant, because there are grants out there that would work for potentially some projects, but not others. Are there like three? Is there a top 3 or a top 5 of what the Rec Advisory Board thinks not only would be great, but would be great soon?
Yeah, so I think I'll point you to kind of like the initial cut that we said, which is kind of page 9, right? Which was kind of the initial piece. Now what we'll do is we've got a meeting on Monday, so I'll go back and I'll raise the question, right? We can make sure we raise the question, say, hey, look, we presented it. This is what we heard. This is what the feedback is. Let's focus on the small money bases, and let's pick 4 or 5, right? And I think that's having the list, that conversation can be relatively quick and be turned around quickly, right? I think that's one of the value of spending the time and going through the process from that perspective. Okay, so.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I guess something that might be helpful to your conversation would be, Bill or maybe Karen, are you aware of grants? And like the grant that you applied for to get the trees for Nelson Sitting Park. That's a perfect example of, there was a grant out there that was able to be directed to that kind of a project. Are there other similar grants out there that the village should be targeting or could be targeting?
There are some grants that they might be able to pay for partial things, like, I know we're not talking about the $500,000 soccer, but there are grants that would help with that. They're not going to pay nearly the cost of that, but they would help in some aspects of it. But we probably do need to do more of that, because as Pat had indicated, we are going to be running out of that park in lieu of parkland funds with the projects that we've got planned. And in order to get some of these projects going and some of the infrastructure that we need to do in the parks, we're going to need some funding. And given the times, we probably have to go try to find that funding from outside sources.
I'll just for folks who don't know, the in lieu of parkland fund, it comes to us when a developer builds and is going to have residential units, and the New York State allows us to then get a fee from the developer. And the logic for it is that there will now be more people in the community living in these residences, and they're going to put a greater burden on the Parks and Recreation. So there's this fund, and it's kind of a special fund that it can even exist. New York State allows it to exist. So we can just, and it's something that ends up getting negotiated. So when there's a really big development, I think I remember now, they pulled their building permit, it was a 6-figure drop right into the in lieu of parkland funds, and that's probably part of what we're still spending today.
Yeah.
So as things, that's sort of something to keep in mind when we do, when there is development that happens in our community. Some of what it does is it helps, it can help invest in our park facilities, which we all benefit from.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, first of all, Pat, thank you for coming tonight. And I know how detailed this presentation is, but when I became a trustee, the Rec Advisory Board is one of the places that I have to be a liaison for. And I was really happy to see that it's one of the boards that was actually quite full. There were some openings, but generally full. The village, as you can see, is fully full. The town has a couple of openings. But what I like about it is that it brings the town and village residents from all different backgrounds and different parts of the community, all coming together really as volunteers on their own time, really bringing forth a lot of ideas. It's an advisory board to the Board of Trustees, working with staff to bring this together. And I think every year, last year you had a presentation as well, always informative. So I really appreciate your time and everybody's time. I'll say that again on Monday when I go to the meeting. It's really great. What's really interesting is we get lots of complaints and recommendations, and this board really focuses on how can we be helpful. What are some of the things when we take tours or when we, during their meetings, lots of organizations come in front of them. They've made lots of changes in the different groups that use our parks. Last year they had another totally different presentation. So I really am so impressed that people who volunteer take such care of advising elected officials and staff on behalf, of themselves as members of the public, as volunteers. I really thank all of you guys. I think this is great. I hope it continues every year, that we document and we see the growth. Maybe next year at this time, the economy will be booming and we will be able to do the bigger projects, and we won't have to start from scratch going, like, what do we think should be done? What are the big ideas? Because it's already there and we need to build on it. So I really do appreciate it. And I thank you for your service and your time. And I do hope this does make its way into the comp plan. And I wanted to ask you, Pat, did you present to the town already, or is that coming up?
No, have not presented yet to the town. Working through that with Jackie in terms of when that'll happen.
So it would make sense that you bring all of that together back to the committee, and then we'll respond to what are the top 3 ideas, because we do have a couple of things that are well, one area that's contiguous, etc. This is just, so thank you. This is a question really for Stuart. I saw in the beginning, and I've seen this presentation, well, many iterations of this as being narrowed down, which was part of the process of coming to agreement and pointing things out. But Stuart, I didn't realize that the chairperson of the committee is a staff person, that it is the superintendent. We had a chairperson when I got there. I think she was there for more than a decade or 15 years or something. And I thought that we appoint and then we have that the group votes on the chair. Has there been a change to this committee? At the beginning of this presentation, it said that the superintendent is the chairperson of the committee.
So, hang on. I'm able to unmute.
Oh. I can't hear Stuart. Can anybody else hear him?
No, Stuart, you still muted. Sorry.
No?
No, he's muted.
He's muted.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think it's so important that we have to hold up the meeting for that answer. I could just get that in an email. Maybe something changed, but Pat, I didn't.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. I took that off the website. So, all right. So I took that description off the village website. So, if it's incorrect, we can fix it.
No, okay. So we don't have to do it now. It just caught me off guard. I'll speak to Stuart separately. It doesn't require us, with respect to people's time. Right. It's not a big issue. It's more like housekeeping, basically.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Thank you, Pat. Really
no
appreciate
problem.
it.
And anyone, feel free to reach out to me with, if you've got questions or any other suggestions as you read through some of the details. All right. Like I said, the appendix, there's a ton of detail. So
yeah, Pat, just real quick, in regards to the steering committee and the comp plan itself, yes. Something like this, I can see, be done. Forrest, maybe Omar can help me with this. And the study halls that we're going to be holding a week before our previous regular meeting. So
okay,
something that we can talk, and then it could be presented as a formally, things like this. I think it should be essential, part of that as well. Not just this topic, but general topics like that. So don't forget, tomorrow we have study hall.
Yes, I have. I've got that booked. So I'll have to jump off a little early, but I'll be on for the start. Absolutely.
So Pat, when you meet with the rec advisory board, you can let them know how much Rika loves seeing the liaison to the rec advisory board.
I will. Just so tell them yourself.
You want the same ones as last year, and Joey starts off by saying, "Okay, well, I want to keep the rec advisory board. Other things I can work with."
All right.
You fit in really well and such an asset to the group. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. On to your next agenda item. Cheers.
Thanks.
Maren, what's up next?
So what's up next? So unfortunately, our next presentation, well, Our next presentation is an update on the Hudson Crest development at 32 State Street. Unfortunately, the developer, Bonnet Lieberman, emailed Stuart and I just a little bit ago. He didn't realize the meeting was going to take so long, had a family issue came up. So he's asked to reschedule. We can reschedule him for the September 2nd meeting, I suppose. But Stuart can provide a brief update on where we are with that project right now from the village perspective.
Thank you, Karen. Sorry about before, folks. My computer froze, so I could not unmute. The demolition of the building is complete. The debris has not been removed. The demolition permit it goes until October the 1st of 2020. We were sent some photographs late this afternoon by Mr. Lieberman's partner, Mr. Malter, which appears to show that areas have been cleaned, I presume fairly recently. No building permit has been applied for. As far as we know, there has been no application. There's been no submission of final plans to the International Code Council, which is needed in order to submit the plans to the building department for plan approval. There are significant outstanding taxes that are owed both to the village and to the town and school district. Those tax liens have been docketed most recently by the village about 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. But there has been no work done on the project, simply put. One of the concerns is that with the work having been done, the Smith Robinson house is, needs to be secured. So that's something that has to be worked on, and I think discussed obviously with Mr. Lieberman and with Mr. Malter when they appear before this board. That's in terms of the work. That's really it. They do have their site plan approval was extended. They did get their variances extended. Their waterfront permit expires in January of 2021. So that's the status on those permits as of right now.
Thank you, sir. I did forward the Board of Trustees the photos that were sent to us this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, we saw the photos. Those must be post-storm because there would have been debris
They're from this week, I believe, yes.
Yeah. Stuart, thank you for reminding us. So the approvals that they have that are, and their approvals are still active, but you've got the site plan approval from the planning board, the variances from the zoning board of appeals, the waterfront special permit from the board of trustees. The waterfront special permit from us expires in January. And this is one of the challenges that we have, and something that we've talked about with the comp plan updates might be to have dates for the ZBA variances more closely coincide with site plan expirations. But do you have in front of you what is, if you said it, I didn't get it down, the site plan approval expiration and the variances approval? I know that they've been getting some extensions, but the extensions can go until when? I think one of them, the site plan was like up to 2 years of extensions, and it was originally 2019.
They can get up to two. They can get up to 2 one-year extensions, Mayor. They got their site plan extension, it looks like in May of this year. Yes, it is. So they would go until May of 2021 for site plan. And with regard to zoning, they have another 6 months, and that goes until actually December of this year. So zoning will actually expire December 10th, followed by the waterfront permit in January of 2021, but they have about another 10 months now to run on their site plan.
So are they eligible to apply for any extensions beyond those dates, or are they exhausted?
Well, if I may, yes. I believe this was their first site plan extension, so they would be entitled to an additional year.
Okay.
With regard to zoning, there is no limit on the number of extensions you can get to zoning variances.
Okay.
And with regard to special waterfront, they simply would have to come back to the board. The permit itself has an 18-month lifespan, but they could return to the board with a new application to extend that.
I believe that there was an acknowledgement that they may not be up to date in some of their tax payments.
They are not. It doesn't mean an acknowledgement. They are not. I can tell you that for certain.
Manny, did you have something you wanted to add to this discussion?
Regards to taxes. So they own the village $97,000, and they own the town, and I just run the numbers. They own the town about $229,000.
Trustee Kazadi, your figures are off. They actually owe total taxes to both municipalities just about $500,000. They owe the village approximately $150,000.
I spoke to Holly this morning. She sent me an email with that information. So
okay, well, I'm going by what Dale gave me at the end of last week, based on Holly's numbers.
All right. So my mistake. So again, so they own a lot of money between the town and the village. Regardless.
An entire soccer field, apparently, in our park system.
So, I mean, in regards to the special permit, there is some provisions in there where the village board has the right to make some modifications, I guess, if I want to be so light. I mean, I was ready for tonight. I'm really disappointed that they're not here tonight, but I'm gonna save it for the next meeting.
Is that when they're coming? Is that the next meeting?
Well, the next time.
No.
The next time they're coming.
September 2nd, Trustee Levin.
Oh, September 2nd, sounding more and more like a lot of stuff going on. Okay. Mayor, are you looking for other comments?
Absolutely. And I also see that Jaime unmuted himself. So Jaime, did you want to interject something at this stage?
No, I was just going to answer a question, but that question got answered. So I'm here to answer questions if you have any.
All right.
I mean, I'm sort of, I feel like a broken record on this topic, so I'll just save my comments. It's too late in the evening, and it gets me totally aggravated. But this is a new one for me, so I would like to get some advice. Stuart, I don't understand what happens when people are in arrears on their tax. What are some solutions? What is our role? That's a new one for me. Not that people don't pay taxes, but that it's now to this extent. And
we can't foreclose until the 3rd year after the taxes are due.
Which would be when?
Another 2 years.
Okay.
But can't we?
They have 2 liens already.
Can we
Sorry?
not?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Manny.
No, according, and I'll forward this email to the rest of the board, the email that I got from Holly. They already have 2 liens on 2019 and 2020.
For the town.
For the town, correct. For the town.
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
Village is only this year.
Correct. Yes.
So only 1 lien in the village. But so we have a lien against their property. They owe $500,000 to the taxpayers of the broader Ossining community. They are going to see their variance expire at the end of the year. So that's 4 months from now. In some instances, we have made it, I believe by code, that an applicant is not eligible, at least in the building department sometimes. You can't get approval for certain permits if you are behind in any of your payments. If you owe the village money for something, if you're not fulfilling your obligation as a resident. So what happens at the end of the year when their variance expires? What would it be? Is the ZBA expected to, I mean, because these extensions are sort of perfunctory and they're these sort of ministerial actions, and we're often told that we should just allow it to go forward, because typically we do allow extensions to, to continue, and it's not something that if we undermine that, then it's considered like we could subject ourselves to an Article 78 or something. Is the ZBA in a position to say, you know what, we're not granting you another extension, even though we often do as a matter of course? We're not going to, because we have a lien, the village has a lien against your property, and you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to the taxpayers.
That's not a basis to deny an extension.
It's not. Okay.
Nope.
Maybe it should be.
So I would note there is one thing, and I want to check with Stuart on this to make sure I'm accurate. I don't believe they can get a building permit until they pay that money towards the DPW.
That part is correct, Jaime. They can't get a building permit. They can't get a CO, but that's separate from getting an extension on either site plan or variances.
Yeah. So there are some limitations right now to getting that building permit. So even if the extensions went through, which I would recommend granting the extensions if you still think the project is good, the building permit process will prevent them from moving past that point. And you can't, and it's, having the approvals is nice, but the building permit is necessary to start the project. So.
Yes, but it sounds like they could drag this process out by getting an extension on their site plan approval next May. They could drag it out until May of 2022. And that property could just continue to remain vacant and be an eyesore in the neighborhood. Granted, it may look lovely today, but that's not been its history as far as how it normally is appearing in the neighborhood. They could drag this out until May 2022. And continue to not pay their taxes and continue to not move forward with the project. And we're just sitting here watching this vacant property not contribute positively to our community. At what point can the village play an active role in saying something needs to happen here? Put up or shut up. What are we going to do?
Well, first of all, the town can foreclose on their lien before we can. So if the town wants to, they can do it next year. Because they actually have an extra year of taxes owed than we do. So if the town wanted to foreclose on the property, they could foreclose. But they still have to wait a year to do it. And the village, by law, has to wait, until there's a longer period of time. That's just what the law is. Otherwise, I will just say this, and I think the board members know this. If the property were to be sold, it's worth much more with the approvals in place than with the approvals not in place. At least at this point, all the approvals are in place. At least that's something there. I don't know what's going to happen in May of 2021 or whatever, but he has other permits that come due, obviously, before that point, both variances and before this board for its special waterfront. And, in addition to the building permits and to the taxes that he owes, as you folks know, he has to pay $192,500 for the infrastructure work before he pulls that first permit anyway. So there's, all that has to happen, and I think obviously the financial wherewithal of this developer is obviously suspect.
Sure. What circumstances would warrant the planning board and the zoning board not to grant them the extension?
Change in circumstances with regard to the project, but outstanding taxes would not be it.
No, I heard that the first time you said it. I just want to know.
It would have to be a significant change in circumstances, that something had occurred which would, change what had been the prior approval. Because generally when you grant an extension, you're basing it upon what the prior approval is.
Right.
Only in limited circumstances could you essentially go beyond those facts.
Okay.
Anybody else have questions or comments about this project? It looks like we're going to have another public discussion in a couple of weeks, but I appreciate our staff getting us a little more up to speed and where we stand right now.
Coming to the lowdown from Corporation Counsel for the last couple of months at least. as far as how this has been progressing. And I've been following this as a spectator before I was on the board. And I, in some ways, was salivating at my opportunity to give these folks a piece of my mind in the proud tradition of trustees past. But more than anything, I'm just disappointed. It's very disappointing that we don't have an opportunity to either move forward with the project or start to do something else, and that this just lingers. And I wish that there was something more that we could do, and I feel very disappointed.
Yeah, I share those sentiments. And, you know, when we talk about what can we do to force something, can we do a foreclosure? When could that happen? When could the town do a foreclosure? That's all the stick. The carrot would be, they have all of their approvals right now. It'd be great if they sold it to somebody else and somebody else came in and something with that property. And there are a lot of things that could be done with it. So right now, while it's a more viable thing to sell, if they know that the community is really eager to see something happen rather than the same status quo, perhaps they'll consider what makes sense for next steps. So maybe that's something that we got out of this evening's discussion. Fingers crossed. All right, any more questions or comments about Hudson Crest? Otherwise, we do have a gentleman here from Kemey's Cove. I see he is still there. He's been extremely patient.
Not hearing any more questions. The next guest is Kemey's Cove has applied for, well, they made a request to discontinue their shuttle service that they have been running for some time to the train station based on the fact that it's no longer being utilized to the same extent that it once was. And we have Mr. Albert Lulaj of Ferrara Management, a management company for Kemey's Cove, who, yes, indeed, has been waiting quite patiently. So welcome.
Hi, how are you? How's everyone doing?
Thank you so
Great.
much for your patience.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you tuning in for the last couple of hours. You've learned so much about village government. To ask your simple request, please.
Yes, thank you for having me. So the reason this came about is around January of this year. The jitney service that we had pretty much decided to end their contract and didn't want to renew their contract any longer due to insurance's increase, and we were left without a service. So we decided to let the homeowners know that if you do decide to use any type of service to make your way from Kemey's Cove to the train station, it's about mostly 400 feet. It's not a far distance. It's literally right down the hill. So we decided that we would reimburse them for any transportation fees that they may inquire. So out of the 120 units at Kemey's Cove, only one person has asked for reimbursement for the first month, and there was no reimbursement asked after that. As the fees have dramatically increased due to the insurance increase, it is way too costly. Too costly for us to keep the service, and in accordance to our offering plan, this is required. This service is required to have, but the board would like to see if we can possibly remove the service from our obligation.
Thanks again, Mr. Lulaj, for joining us. I really enjoyed. Stuart sent us some of the original document. Ooh, somebody's got some weird feedback. The original documents from the 1970s. I'm going to mute somebody.
Someone is echoing.
Stuart, you may want to mute Stuart.
All right, let's see if that's better. So it was really fun to look at some of the documents from the 1970s when this was originally passed. And see, I think it was Mayor Wheeler and Trustee Engel, who we now have a park named for. It was, and so I really enjoyed this process. And this resolution was a little different than some of the arrangements that we have with different developments over time. Things have been handled in different ways by planning board, by village board, depending on where the development, how it originated, or maybe what exactly type of development it is. And I had a little bit of an exchange with Stuart earlier today by email, because I'd become aware that Avalon recently, which is a different development, it's obviously a newer development, it's rentals, and it does have some affordable units incorporated into it, although not the majority. But they had originally had a shuttle service as part of their site plan agreement, which I think was approved by the planning board. So it didn't come to us. But what they did when they, and Stuart, I'm sure will clarify if I'm misrepresenting it, because I didn't get a detailed explanation from the planning board member who told me about it. But they replaced it with an agreement to provide vouchers for any residents who wanted to use Lyft or Uber to be used as transportation to the trains. And that obviously saved them a lot of money, because it was just, on an as needed basis. But it did, and it also reflects just where we are today. I mean, people don't use shuttle services the way that they once did. And Uber and Lyft certainly did not exist in 1973. But in general, we in the village would like to discourage single occupancy vehicles from driving down to our waterfront and taking up, a few square feet of space for 10 hours a day at the waterfront. And if we can encourage people to, who are commuters or using the train to find some alternative transit, then that's a good thing. Plus, I think it also, we'll see, things change with every generation. But it is something that, to this point, people, I assume there was a time anyway, when people who moved into Kemey's Cove, when they were selling their condos, could say that was an asset, that was an amenity that came with the facility, and just now it's not the amenity that is in popular use. But I really I don't want to discourage the connectivity for residents to the train. So is that an alternative that you think could work at Kemey's Cove, that you could incorporate into what you offer to your residents in lieu of?
We did offer them to give her, as far as vouchers, I could bring it up to the board if that's something we can possibly, if they want to decide to move with something of that sort. But we haven't really had any negative feedback on since the service hasn't been available. It's been since February that we have discontinued it. And we have given them the option to whoever uses, either give us a receipt for parking if you decide to drive down and park your car for the monthly fee that you pay, or if you decide to use any type of vehicle to make your way down there. And we really haven't had any inquiries, or it was one resident that in the beginning made a little fuss about it and then realized it's literally 400 feet away. It's not a huge distance. So the board would like to completely get rid of it and just not have this on their radar at all anymore, if there's a possibility that you guys agree with this.
I've said quite a bit. Anybody else have feedback? Trustee Lopez?
Yeah. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Lulaj. So my
Thank you for having me.
That on its face, it totally makes sense. I think the only wrinkle is that you discontinued it in February, and then the pandemic started in March, and then a lot of the commuters that would usually be using it are not using it. So I don't know what the numbers would have looked like if you discontinued it during non-pandemic times. That would be my only hesitation to fully saying, yes, get rid of it. But if you have this as an alternative and people seem to be using it, or at least like be aware of it and it works, then I could be in favor of it. I just don't want to, I could very much see 2-3 years in the future. I'm walking down Kemey's Cove and talking to folks, and they're telling me, we used to have this jitney that we don't have anymore, and you got rid of it, and it's because you don't care about people at Kemey's Cove. And it's like, so convince me that I'm wrong. That's how I'm feeling. Thank you.
No, we did send a notice out. We did send a notice out to all homeowners that we are inquiring with the village of Ossining to discontinue the jitney service completely, and we did not get any feedback back in response, any negative feedback or anything of that sort. Most people, even speaking to residents, speaking to the super and the porter there, I even stood out there while we were still having it going in the end months, because February was going to be the last month. It's literally, it would be one person, two people that would use it. And we also had an agreement with Liberty Knoll, which is further up, where we would split the service and the fees. But it just didn't make sense on our end to have it when we only had, out of 120 units, 3-4 users a day. That's the only thing. That's my only reason behind it, pretty much.
Yeah, I understand.
Others with questions and comments?
Yeah, I just, look, one of the reasons that these jitneys exist is an environmental reason of not having 5 people go down and park, especially when it's so close to the train. And there is a difference between a rental. In a rental environment, the management company and the owners are the ones that make profits. In your case, you're condos, and therefore you have to have a vote or an agreement by a board who represents owners. The truth is that jitneys and all of those things are not only environmental issues, they were also designed because there were agreements of allowing developers to build based on an understanding that they will not cause parking issues and traffic issues. So you get those understandings and then sort of get rid of them because it's an expense. So that makes me sort of uncomfortable on one hand. On the other, we're talking about 1971 here. It's not like you got it 5 years ago and immediately got rid of it, and it's owners that want it. Thirdly, my issue is, and I'll get to what I would like to have as a commitment from Kemey's Cove. Thirdly, it will always be the minority that needs the jitney. I mean, I lived in a place that had a jitney because I was a commuter. It's never going to be the majority that needs it. It's predominantly the 6 or 10 or 15 commuters that need it. Rarely would you see a building where, you know, you'd have 90%, I mean, not rarely, but I don't think it's realistic to think 90% of those people are commuters and need that service. It would make me feel better if you can commit in writing that you will offer this voucher for the next 10 years or indefinitely or whatever, because it would solve for the other issues and whether people choose to use it or not. And by the way, kudos for even thinking of doing it. Frankly, even more convenient than Uber or a taxi, because you're giving people the option. Take
Correct.
whatever you want, whatever you're convenient, give me the receipt, I'll give you the money back. That's terrific. I like it. Very easy, very comfortable. People come home 11 o'clock at night, they don't have to worry about walking in the snow 400 feet. You know, that's one of the things. So for consistency and to think about it, it would make me feel personally really happy to support what your board wants if the board would just give us a letter that goes into public record that for the next X number of years that anybody that buys in there or lives there currently could continue with the offer you had just represented to us that you offered. It's up to them to take that or not based on whatever they want. And I'm sure whatever that is, it will be far cheaper than having a jitney on a regular basis. So it's a win-win for everybody, and it allows us to send a message that says you can't come in, say you have a jitney, and I'm not implying that that's what you guys did. I'm not at all. But going forward, that it's offered and then taken away once the developer, whatever, gets what they want. And being a little cynical here, but I do appreciate that you guys read the originals. If you could make me feel comfortable, I think the rest of the board, I don't see any downside to this voucher system. And I think it's in good form. And I think that it's the owners that vote on this. I see this only as a win-win. And I'm really happy to support that if you guys could do that.
So,
and I don't know if you have the power to say, yes, we will, or you need to now go to the board and say, can we offer this voucher thing and give a letter in writing that says for X number of years to come or forever or whatever. I don't know how others feel on the board. That would make me feel good.
I'm sorry, I'm in support of the voucher system. My question to Stuart would be, is this something, if we eliminate this jitney, is this something we can suspend? And then at a later date, if they decide all of a sudden there's a mass demand that we could reinstate? Or is this a one-time deal, we take it off and it's done? Right.
It depends how you draft the resolution. They're asking to basically get rid of the condition, which was in the 1973 resolution. If you want to put something in that it's something that they might have to come back to the board. For example, in the situation with Avalon was required to come back before the planning board, I believe every 2 to 3 years, advising what the situation was vis-a-vis their transportation system. So there's nothing that would prohibit the Board of Trustees from having something in there. And if circumstances change, Trustee Fritchie, then the conditions could change as well.
Okay. It's an open-ended thing. You know, it may never change, but to have the option there, so to go back to it if it's financially better for the owners, I just think it might be an option. I don't know how anybody else feels about it. I'm in favor of the vouchers right now, but I'm also leaning towards, you know, leaving it as an open-ended thing, or every couple of years, like you said, come back and give us an update. Where are you at? We're still in the vouchers. We only have 2 people using it, 5 people using it. We don't have the demand for a jitney right now. We'd like to extend the way we were going. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
I think we're all kind of coalescing around the same concept that we want there to, we're okay with walking away from the jitney. It's sort of a dated approach. And it's obviously not serving, it's not providing the environmental, it's not even an option right now because the company doesn't want to do it. But it's also, at one time, if it was well utilized, then it would be an environmental plus. If it's not well utilized, then that value is really diminished. But that there are other options right now. The fact that you started off by, yep.
I disagree with your statement that we all agree. All right. Omar made a statement that, you know, if he was approached, you guys, why'd you get rid of it? I haven't heard from Manny yet. And Rika only said that, you know, she was in favor of the vouchers. So saying that we all agree is you're speaking for me, Omar, and everybody else. I disagree with that statement.
Okay, that's fine. What I'm hearing is that there is some agreement that the jitney may be a dated option and was not serving the population very well. One of the suggestions is to have these vouchers. It sounds like what's already happening is that you've offered to do a reimbursement for other means that individuals in the development have been using. Any document that that I would be comfortable supporting, I don't mind if if there's some flexibility on how the alternative means are provided. Whether it's a voucher, because that's what makes sense today, because Lyft and Uber have those vouchers, or if it's a reimbursement because residents find that it's actually more convenient to just grab a cab on the way, you know, because cabs may be waiting there when they get to, like, whatever works. You know, I'm fine with the alternatives, but what I feel pretty strongly about, and that I think I've heard from the people who've spoken so far, is that providing something, we would feel better about that than just eliminating it altogether. Manny, did you want to comment on this?
Thank you, Mayor. Correct. I believe that we should definitely have something in writing on their behalf. I agree with Deputy Mayor Levin in regards to have something from them, because it's essential for us, you know, and I figure maybe 5 years or even 3 years should be for them to come back to us and you know, going what Trustee Fritchie said, you know, they should be able to come back to us. Maybe the situation changes, you know, maybe there's a need for that. So I think a combination of both will be helpful for future boards to make, you know, just a similar decision that we are taking, or something different at that point, you know, so.
All right. The only last statement I would like to make, like I stated before, it's 120 units, and we literally had one person that complained about the jitney service. So it's not something where it seems like people were depending on having the service. It was not utilized until it wasn't even brought to our attention. We weren't even aware of it, that it wasn't utilized as much until it came down to the last few months, where the contract we had in place made us aware that he can't renew any longer due to insurance purposes. And we just, we send out a small questionnaire. We send out notices to get some feedback from homeowners. And there wasn't really much feedback that came back to us on people actually utilizing the service. That is the main reason why they want to completely get rid of it. But I understand your point in regards to what we have in place so far. If we can extend it for a 5-year process and come back to you, if that's your ultimate decision so far.
I'm just throwing it out there as an option, because, you know, people move, people sell, you know, you never know, you know, things, the whole concept of the 120 units could change. It might not. I'm just saying that as an option to just, you know, I don't have a problem with you getting rid of it. I agree with the voucher thing. I'm just saying to, you know, Stuart, if we say, okay, they're going to get rid of it and we don't put any language in there saying that they could come back, is it a done deal, or can they just come back?
Well, if you do not put any conditions and you essentially just terminate the service, then that condition is taken out of the resolution, and you know it doesn't come back. I mean, if they on their own then wanted to start a jitney service, they could do it, but they wouldn't need any board approval for it. If you don't place any conditions, then it's a done deal.
Okay, I threw it out there as an option. I'm good either way. I'm on board with the vouchers.
Okay, so maybe Stuart can, Stuart, you've heard a lot of our feedback. Maybe you can provide us with a recommendation on a resolution going forward that would modify how Kemey's Cove might provide options for their residents to be reimbursed in some form with vouchers or whatever, to be able to get to the train, whether they're walking, not everybody can walk easily, whether they're driving, or whether they are you know, taking some sort of alternative means of transportation that doesn't require parking at the train. As so
understood, Mayor. I'll touch base with Mr. Lulaj, because he's obviously got to go back before his board to see that they're, you know, amenable to what we've talked about. But I'll talk to him so he can then discuss with his board, and then we can all get back and see where we are.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Lulaj, for joining us and for your patience and for telling us about the circumstance there at Kemey's Cove. It's been a pleasure spending a Wednesday evening with you. I hope you never have to do it for so many hours again.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I understand. There were many more important things there. Not that my case wasn't important, but
everything is important. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good evening.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
So Karen, go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, we've had a lot of, let me try and keep this on the camera. We've had a lot of conversations by email among the trustees and staff and I, because there is a very special opportunity for, it's Westchester Power, right? That has a $500 donation that all the participating municipalities.
It's Sustainable Westchester through Constellation Power. They had some refunds that they needed to provide back to the community, and Sustainable Westchester was able to get some additional monies because there was I think you know, the customers were charged an overage. They were made whole, but Sustainable Westchester wrangled additional monies for the community, and the municipalities were beneficiaries of a $500 contribution that would be made by Sustainable Westchester to the nonprofit. It had to be a 501c3 charitable entity of the village's choosing. But in choosing, as we well know, we have such an enormous range of fabulous nonprofits that we could not make that choice. So, Mayor,
Karen stopped by
explain how
my
we got to the hat. So,
we had a lot of different ideas of how we would do this, and we really hadn't. This was like, talk about everything being important and requiring a lot of conversation. We've been talking about it for weeks. So now we're finally going to do it. Karen stopped by my house today with an envelope of these little slips of paper. I just put them in the hat. We all, sort of, the staff came up with a list of a bunch of the 501c3s that do great work around our community, and I am going to blindly select one of them, and it is Ossining Cap. Ossining Cap is the very lucky recipient, and I'm delighted. Ossining Cap has been doing some really terrific work. It couldn't go to a more worthy cause that's been just so active, especially in these last few months in supporting the families of Ossining. So we'll have to let Kemey and her team know that they are going to be receiving a generous donation as the lucky recipient. All right.
That's wonderful. So great way to finish off our meeting tonight. It was a long meeting, but it was a lot of interesting things on the agenda. And Ossining Cap will now have $500 to spend on the good work they do.
Excellent. All right. So if there's nothing more, and there's no executive session tonight, right? So we just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Next week, it will be virtual again, but Rika will be chairing the meeting. I finally get to leave town and let Rika chair a meeting. I don't let her do that very often. So you get the virtual gavel next week.
I'm very nervous. Very nervous.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thanks all. Have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.